All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the TFTuesday Podcast. My name is Zill, and today is an absolutely fabulous fucking day because I'm excited to announce that we learned just a few short minutes ago that we've been nominated at the Ursa Major Awards for the podcast. So, yeah, first of all, big thank you to everyone who worked to get us nominated. It means a lot to us, and we're really excited just to be nominated, to be frank. And we'll have information as to if you want to go vote for us. You can check out the Ursa Major's website, which is ursamajораwards.org. And you can actually sign up to put in your email, get a key, and then vote. So we highly encourage you to vote for us. It's our Saber Spark episode in the best non-fiction work category. But other than that, just kind of floored, honestly, that we actually got nominated. It's quite momentous. Yeah, I'm joined by my illustrious co-host k-libra. How you doing, k-libra?
Pretty good. I like that news too. It's nice to be nominated for an award for this. It makes God, that was such a learning experience trying to figure out how to actually make the video, and it was exciting, and it was a big jump for the podcast in general. So to maybe get that kind of to get some recognition, win an award for the beginning of something new feels really nice.
Yeah,
especially since it's yeah. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say that it was also something that we really cared about. Despite how you felt about the episode, the reason we made it was because there was no way we weren't going to talk about it.
Yeah, I think, I almost think of the award as, or like being nominated for the award as like kind of being a recognition of the entirety of seasons 3 and 4, which was for the calendar year. But like you said, Libra, I think the reason why in particular we were hoping that one would get nominated was, people had certain feelings about the episode, but in particular, I think there was an increase in our video editing that you did, and I think there was a really big increase just in terms of the passion that we had for what we were talking about. And even if it wasn't quite the standard episode that we usually do, I think it really stood out as being an opportunity for us to take a big swing. And it looks like it hit, at least as far as getting nominated, and that's incredible news for us anyways.
So I love that. If you don't take the big swing, then you don't get anything. You don't take the chance to get anything. You can get something if you join our Patreon, though. You just you swing as hard or as soft as you want to. It's low risk, low commitment. You can ask friends. Maybe you have friends who are patrons too. Do they think that you should join? The answer is probably yes. Of course, within your means. We got several tiers, of course, and if you want to pick higher tier, eventually you could get your name in the credits for the episode as well. As associate producer, it seems kind of nice.
Yeah. And, we have many additional extra hidden benefits that come around once in a blue moon. For example, you might see me working on art that has a bussy in it. So, that's alwaes a perk.
I don't know. Bussy. There was some lombax tee-heeing.
Okay, well, yes, it was covered bussy, but you understand what I mean.
No, I have no idea what you're talking about.
And of course, a special shout out to the patron who just joined our Patreon. A shout out to Raisin, who clearly the Raisin Room was made for. So, we really appreciate Raisin joining as well, I gotta say.
It's pretty cosmic. The Raisin Room is there for a reason.
It is.
A reason. And now for a raisin. Speaking of which, the raisin that we're here for. Cobalt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, sure. I'm Cobalt Kimera. Cobalt-k for short. I go by that on some places. And that's my signature. But the full name is Cobalt Kimera. And thank you very much for having me on the podcast. I'm really excited to be here. And again, congratulations on the nomination. That's awesome.
Thanks so much. Yeah, no, we're really excited to have you here. And, I think just in general, you've had such an interesting path through furry NTF, as it were. So really excited to finally have you on and get to chat with you about a variety of different things.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I guess, I'm kind of curious. We have a lot of things I want to chat about, particularly the webcomic of yours, UTC. But I was curious if maybe you wanted to share a little bit as to how you got into TF in the first place.
Yeah, so that is, to make a long story short, because I've been into TF for over a couple of decades now. I got into it really the same way, the same story a lot of people have. We all have this shared thing where we find something, either a cartoon or a comic or something that is just like, ooh, that's really interesting. This person transforming into something else. And at some point, I started just like thinking, oh, I could draw my own transformations. And around that same time that I was starting to write and draw, just nothing, like it wasn't anything I was showing anybody. It was just like, ooh, I'm really interested in this. I'll just draw it in my sketchbook, or I'll type up something on my floppy disk that I keep with myself so that no one will find it on the computer. But at some point, we ended up getting cable internet, not just dial-up. So the at the time vastness of the internet was finally introduced to our household, and then I found that there were other people online that just happened to also like these things. And for me, the gateways were through Sonic the Hedgehog fan fiction, and also there's a couple of websites that were focused on specifically long hair, because I was really into just rapid hair growth, like obviously like the Rapunzel story and things like that. The movie hadn't come out yet, but there were things like The 10th Kingdom, that miniseries on, I think it was ABC, where the main character goes through, is given the Rapunzel curse, and her hair growth starts to grow rapidly, and it's a big deal for like an episode. And I was like, that's cool. No one's ever done, like, I've never seen someone do that particular storyline before, and I loved the way they did that. And so, like, there were stories like that on, like, this hair stories archive. And it was like, okay, so it's like, that was my first foray of like, oh, there's niche stuff on the internet. Like, before I even knew what the word niche was. And so from there, I started finding like actual like websites dedicated to transformation. And then pretty much just kept expanding from there as new sites came up and new artists appeared. And at one point I just decided, okay, I really need to actually like do something that can be shown to the internet, because there's so much great art, there's so much great stories, and a lot of them have been inspiring, and it's just like, I don't feel alone anymore. I want to be part of this. I want to be someone else's inspiration. I want to give back to the community that was so inspiring to me in my formative years of developing this interest, and all the different things, and different triggers and storylines and types of things you can turn into. So that's where UTC kind of came from, and from there, just the rest is like, it kept just spiraling from there, like meeting new people who were reading my comics and getting to be friends with them, and just continuing to grow into the fandom through that.
Yeah. And I gotta say, like, not only just through UTC, or Urgent Transformation Crisis, which is the whole title, not just through that, but, you've been doing comics for, I think like almost 20 years now. And it's very clear, like, from the body of work that you've kind of put out there, that you have a very strong background in understanding how comics work, and different tropes and stuff. Did that also play into kind of that interest from like a strong angle, or was it more yes, you wanted to give back to the community and you wanted to kind of integrate TF into a story, and you were just focused kind of from that angle?
It was like, I wanted primarily to do something with transformation as like the front and center element. It's like, all right, we all know why we're here. This is a story about characters turning into other like animals or something else, and dealing with the consequences. But I've been drawing comics well before I even knew that I was into TF. Ever since I was gifted my very first comic book way back when I was 8 years old, I had wanted to just make comics. Like, there's just something really enchanting about comics where it's both a literary and a visual medium at the same time in equal measure, or as equal as it could possibly be. And I also was big into, obviously, like TV and movies, and I just wanted to be a storyteller, and the mediums that I was attracted to the most were comics and television. And so I learned first on my own, but then also like, trying to get better as a writer, and then eventually I went to school for film to learn how to make movies. I didn't end up breaking into the industry, but like all the stuff that I learned about storyboarding and plot and all, from writing to executing a visual story, that all translated back into comics. At the end of the day, it's just like, what are comics but a more refined and complete storyboard? So it all fed back into that, where I'm like, all right, I can do this. I can make this love letter to the TF fandom in Urgent Transformation Crisis, but I want to make sure I do it in a way that's satisfying and not just be like, oh, that was a cool transformation and move on, which totally fine. It's awesome. Please, like, the internet, please keep doing that, everybody. But like there's just something about, like, I want this story to really be a story, to work as a story, but also put transformation front and center.
It's funny, I didn't actually know about your background in film, and now that I'm thinking back, like, there definitely was, almost cinematic touches to certain, like, sequences and, like, pages that you had in the comic, so that I think it translated really well. Sorry, Libra was gonna say something.
Oh, I was just pretty interested in the film background and the idea of giving back. I hear people say, like, oh, I want to give back, but I never feel like I really owed anything to the community, and I just wondered what made you feel like you had to give back exactly.
It doesn't necessarily come out of a sense of obligation, although I can't deny that there's a little bit of that. But it's more the idea of, we're all sitting around a campfire, and you just want to be included on, like, the round around, like, all right, you tell a scary story, you tell a spooky story, you tell another scary story or mystery or something, and we're all just adding to the evening, the fun of the evening, and having a great time bouncing ideas back and forth. Like, how many situations have we seen, like, on social media, and even before social media existed, but like on Transfer or on FA or something, where you have artists doing art trades and things like that, and it is transactional. Like, from a mechanical standpoint, it's transactional. You make art for me, I'll make art for you, but it's so much more than that when you look at the types of art that they choose to make, and the meanings behind those. And that's also something, like, in UTC, the main goal was, I just want to have fun with transformation, and the cherry on top is, I want to make something that other people, especially the TF artists that I love so much, and the TF writers that I love so much, will also get a big kick out of, and also put my own spin on it, because there are things that I wasn't seeing as often utilized, such as goat anthros at the time. I didn't see a whole lot of transformations involving goats, especially ones that weren't, like, positive. And so there's things like that. And that's kind of getting off on a separate topic, but, like, it ties back into the idea of, when I say giving back, the way I think about it is, it's not just, oh, you did this awesome thing for me, I want to do this awesome thing for you. Like, it's also, I want to just spread the joy to everyone. Mm-hmm. And there's absolutely no judgment. Like, I'm not putting judgment on anybody for just absorbing the transformations. Just like, oh, this artist does great stuff, these writers do great stuff, and I'm enjoying all of it, and I'm comfortable with that. I am comfortable with that. I'm not going to draw. I don't really feel like creating more stuff back. I'll just enjoy what's being doled out. That's fine too. That's like, we're all just trying to spread the joy of how fun and interesting transformation stuff can be.
Yeah, I get that. That I would characterize that more as kind of like joining the chorus of voices or something like that instead, which is why I like the analogy of the campfire, because the idea of giving something back, it's like you said, it's like a feeling of obligation. But I always found it strange when some people would say, "Oh, I want to give back." And I'm like, well, we all do this because we want to, a little bit of acknowledgement or whatever is often something that we would like, but generally, for myself, I wanted to represent things like you did that either felt underrepresented, or you didn't like it the way it was being done, or wanted to try something that or attempting to do something new if you think it was never done before. But yeah, I just find that curious, because it's a motivation that I have heard some people give me when it comes to why they started making it. And giving back is something that I've heard, and I always thought to myself, give back to who for what? like many of us don't even want to be owed anything. Like if you ever heard of something wild in what I feel is almost the distant past now.
It is almost a distant past now, which is weird to say, but anyways, continue.
Yeah, he mentioned how he's not really interested in making a business or making money off of what he does. He just wants to share it with people. And this was in a conversation with somebody whose interest was very much about the money. And I found it kind of galling when he was framed as somebody who makes it hard to make money in this because you're just giving it away for free.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's some deep lore behind that comment. I don't know if we have time to get into that.
No, we're not going to get into that.
But I did want to shift back just to UTC because one of the things that really struck me as I was reading it, because full disclosure, I binged it all in one go and I loved it. But one of the things that really stood out to me about UTC was the way in which it used its characters, because I think every character in the story has their own character arc and their own sort of beginning, middle, and end in terms of the first three phases that you've published. And in particular, I found that there was a really focused contrast between the two provisionally main characters, Cass and Flint, and how they reacted to their respective transformative situations. And Cass really, like, over the course of UTC, responds in a fairly standard, like, I don't want this approach. Whereas Flint is more of like a stand-in for TF and Therian folks in terms of, I'm happy with this, I don't actually want to change back. So I was curious if you had that sort of thought in mind when you were crafting that contrast.
Yeah, it was first, like, binging it all in one sitting. That's amazing that, like, you, like, even in one sitting, like, seeing the vast array of, like, where the comic starts and where my artistic ability starts and the way I'm writing it to now, it's just really heartening and gratifying to hear that it holds up on a full, consistent read, as opposed to, all right, I'll read a few chapters and sit on it for a little while and maybe forget a few details, but then come back and and you can, that's
yeah.
yeah.
The hyper focus went burr, and I read the whole thing in one go, and it really was cohesive, in my opinion. It really was cohesive, which I loved. So
I think it's a good way to enjoy comics if they're long and have arcs, because the gap in between reading things will force you to forget things, which is why when I was reading Dungeon Meshi for the first time and I was getting one issue a year for a few years, I would just reread the whole thing each time.
Yeah.
And yeah, you also were spared what a lot of my very, very patient readers have had to go through, which was massive hiatuses. There were times I took entire years off unexpectedly, sometimes unexpectedly, sometimes I was like, all right, I'm definitely not getting back for another 6 months, but then 18 months would go by and I'm like, okay, I really need to get back into the game and start making these comics. So yeah, and a lot of webcomics, of course, do this. We're not doing this as a career. We're doing this because, we just want to do this passion project, and Patreon, I guess not recently, it's been 10 years since Patreon came out almost. Patreon was such a game changer in that, where we could actually get some support there, but even then there are times when, like, I've paused my Patreon campaign because I'm like, I'm not putting pages out and it's wrong for me to ask you guys to donate even, like, anything for this. But I really appreciate how everyone stuck with the comic through all the hiatuses and stuff.
Well, it's kind of like Berserk. It really is. If
Check
you
off
know,
your
you
bingo
know.
card. But yeah, sorry.
Your question
back
about
to Cass and Flint.
Yeah, Cass and Flint. So, UTC, like, originally was nothing like the comic that it existed. I'm not sure if you found it on the website, but buried in the archives is an issue 0, which I made 2 years before, and it starred a cat girl named Kate. And she was basically part of, like, a task force of were creatures who would go around trying to help other were creatures in a world where most people are not. Most people are humans. And Cass and Flint were originally created as one-offs, as, like, a single issue adventure where through no fault of their own, like a magician turns them into a goat and a I'm not sure if Flint was originally a squirrel or not, but the idea was I'd like to play with the concept of two characters who have a very close bond. One hates their transformation, one loves their transformation, but they're both in the same pickle of we got this way through no, like, this is totally unexpected, unasked for, and we have to figure out how to cope with it. And Kate was originally going to be the character that came in to deal with their transformation. But then the more I was writing that series, the more I'm like, I'm not interested in anyone except Cass and Flint in this story. So then I rebuilt UTC around Cass and Flint. So yeah, that contrast was the core of the series from the beginning.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, and I definitely felt like very much drawn in by their stories in particular, so it makes sense that you focused on that. Although I'm curious then, were there any like character arcs in particular that you're especially partial towards besides Cass and Flint, or were there any that like kind of surprised you with how they developed?
For sure. The biggest surprise was the way Morty's entire arc came about. He was from the beginning, he was just going to be a two-dimensional character. That was all I had originally developed him for. He was just going to be the antagonist, and there would be a series of, more wacky hijinks type stuff where he would constantly be trying to get Cass's goat in the literal and figurative sense, and also be the catalyst for a lot of the other unwilling transformations that would have happened during the comic. But things changed very quickly when I wrote. It was in chapter 3. Cass already tries to. Cass is already unsuccessful in trying to undo the damage herself with Demetrius's help, and she's like, "All right, I got to go to the source. I got to just confront Morty." And originally, it was just written as this back and forth, just shouting match between the two of them. And I'm like, this isn't really going anywhere, and I'm not really sure where to progress the story from. And at the time, I had a friend, he was actually my roommate at the time, and we were developing each other's comics together, and so like we were contributing different things to each other's comics, and one thing that he suggested to me was, why don't you approach it from the idea of Cass was this isn't just like some wacky hijinks, like her entire body's been altered against her will. She's been attacked, and you could approach it from that angle, and that's when the idea came to be like, okay, then let's confront Morty with this. Like, let's confront, because even I was not paying attention to the reality of that. But when we went in to do that thing, and I rewrote the entire confrontation scene that happens in Morty's hall, and it turns into this like Morty has like the same kind of aghast, like, oh, what have I done? This isn't what I expected. That was me writing the story, being like, I am surprised at how dark my own comic is if you stop and think about it for just a few extra minutes, my friend suggested. And so that pivoted the entire thing on a brand new trajectory that just took Morty beyond just being the villain who's just going to be this two-dimensional character into, oh, this is now a massive arc for him. He's about to go on a journey of realizing that real people are being harmed by his own flights of fancy and his own vindictiveness, very shallow attitudes that he's had, and he's having to confront all of that. So every single piece of his arc is moving him one step forward continuously towards becoming just a better, more whole person who cares about others, who takes responsibility for the wrong things he has done and tries to correct his behavior.
Yeah. I really want to read it now as well, because when you said that Morty does something that he stops and regrets, it makes me think of this really fucking stupid Rick and Morty animation that's on YouTube where Morty leaves Rick because he's tired of his shit, comes back as this hugely built dude, and he's like, Rick, I hate porn. Rick is like, who's porn? Rick, I hate it, and I'm gonna kill it, and I'm gonna kill you, Rick, I'm gonna kill you. And then he just beats him to death on the carpet, and then he's just like, oh no, it's a dream, it's a dream, it's a dream.
Jeez.
It is really funny though, that page. It stands out to me as well as being like the start of wait a minute, this is a really interesting approach to take for the supposed two-dimensional villain. Like, Cass shows up at his castle and is like, okay, yeah, you won. Like, what do you want me to do? And he's like, oh, what have I done? I thought I was gonna like enjoy gloating over you, but actually this sucks. And it's just it's a great moment. And I think the other thing that surprised me about his character arc was his relationship with 13, his cat assistant, as it were. Especially in terms of where it ended up going by the end. I was really surprised and impressed with how their dynamic grew and evolved over time. And it's very clear, even from just early on, that he has this care towards her, but it's more than just I'm your creator type thing. Like, he genuinely does care about her. And you even see this early on, like in chapter 7 with the Terror of the Jackal and like his concern from her when the Jackal TFs are happening. So, I thought it was really interesting that he started out very much seeming like, oh, this is like a comic book villain, right? And then it's like, no, actually not really. And he's going to go in an interesting direction of his own.
Yes. Yeah, it really helped pair off with Morty's, because just like Morty, 13 was just going to be this like two-dimensional, very very much more of a background character, just like the hanger-on, like if the typical like cartoon villain duo where one person is the brains and the other one just does whatever the brain says to do. And so she was just written to be this cheerful sidekick. And then like, if Morty's evolving, then we're also going to be addressing all of the people he's wronged and hurt and stuff. We also have to address 13 is her own person. He may have grown her in a lab, but and she, he may have grown her in a lab just a few months ago, literally, but she has grown into a fully intelligent, fully realized person, whether she realizes it or not. And how Morty's relationship with 13 changes as a result of Morty learning what empathy is, and putting others before himself, and reckoning with things that he does. It's like it got to a great situation now where we're leaving off with them. For those who haven't read the story all the way through the end yet, I won't say specifically, but like, should the comic go further, we're going to continue to see more and more a continuation of this from both Morty and 13. But actually, like, I'm kind of excited more for 13 at this point, in a way, because I haven't gotten to do much with her yet, because it was, and I don't know how fair this is to 13 or not. We had to kind of wait for Morty to get to a certain place before a few of the ideas that I'm hoping to do for 13 could happen. And now we are there. We've reached a particular inflection point for 13's character as well now. And yeah, so it's been those two, Morty and 13 in particular, are they've evolved beyond anything that I had originally hoped that they would be.
Yeah. I will say that 13, again, not to spoil it for anyone who's hasn't read it yet, but in the last chapter that has been published, I think she has some of the most pivotal and interesting character turns, and it was really wonderful to see. So I was I came away from that in particular, like, obviously, there's all the other ending stuff, but I was really impressed with where her character arc had led to by the end of phase 3.
If you don't mind sticking on this topic for just a moment, there's one other character that sort of, it's more of a personal character arc for me, where that I'm particularly partial toward, and that is Noah's character arc, which was something that very much grew out of my own personality, I guess. When the story started, Noah was a glorified prop. He was the boyfriend. Like, you don't even get to know him in the first few chapters. He's barely even there, and we're even introduced to him before he even appears as the guy that Cass has a crush on. When they, early in the series, they make their relationship official, and they have a heart-to-heart with each other. And from that point on, I made sure to add him. Like, he's now an official main character. He's going to show up in every chapter, and I'm going to give him something to do. And at that point, it was like, all right, now I retroactively need to give him a character arc, like a proper one. So what is that? I'm like, well, let's take a look at like what he's presented as. He's this cool guy. He makes dramatic entrances. He shows up right on time to save the day. But it's like, that's not a character. Those are just traits. And what I ended up doing was and the other thing was, like, his TF arc was all that I had written for him. Not a personality, but he was the character that was going to experience the slow, drawn-out TF. Because UTC is meant to be like, I wanted to put as many different types of TF experiences in as possible, types, triggers, whatever. And I love a good slow TF. And Noah's the slowest burn of all of them. So the idea of, okay, he's gonna be transforming slowly over time, but like, why? Why is he allowing that to happen? Like, narratively, I don't want him to reverse that anytime soon because, it's interesting to us to see his progression. But now I have to justify in story why is he ending up that way. And I landed on this, like, motivation of, I want to put Cass and Flint first because I love Cass and Flint is Cass's brother. They're very important. And because I'm now, if I'm going to have a real relationship with Cass, I need to care about her family too. But that had the side effect of him putting himself last. And that is when, like, it snapped into places, making him a fully dimensional character, because then I was able to go different places with that and use certain tendencies that are also often my tendencies to, like, burn the candle at both ends, to to catastrophize in certain situations where he doesn't have actual control because he's not used to not having control over, like, making sure something goes right in a tough spot, having an inflated sense of self-importance. That results in, like, these personal sacrifices that no one's asking him to make. He just feels obligated to make them. And so that is, like, that was one that eventually, when I finally got there, it was that also felt very rewarding to write for, because in a way it was kind of me exercising some of my own demons.
Okay, so you put aspects of yourself and just kind of made them into characters. Is that what you did for a fair amount of them, or what? Because there's different kinds of there's different approaches to making characters, and some people like to do it with representing a person that they knew or an aspect, and sometimes it's an aspect of oneself. Like, this is the me that's this is the me that's whatever, so on. So are there a good number of characters that are just different parts of you interacting with each other?
That's a really good question, especially, like, the different ways people have constructed characters. And I never, like, I thought about it for particular characters. Surely, if we dig deep enough, there's probably a little bit of me in every single character. In UTC in particular, I did it on purpose with two characters. One was Flint, and one was Noah. Flint was, first and foremost, like, very much me as a young kid being introduced to, like, the first bits of transformation cartoons and books that I was reading in the 90s, and being, like, so enamored with this, and hoping every night I would have a dream where I would wake up transformed, or I would just dream about experiencing transformation, and it not really, those dreams not really coming, and just me being constantly chasing that thought. Flint is the personification of what if young me could have had that. And so turning him into a flying squirrel was like, all right, this is potential for me to work out some stuff that the childish part of me that I've refused to let go of can just flex. And so in that way, Flint's actually the easiest character to write for, because I just listen to my own brain just start chattering, and a lot of the words that Flint just has, a lot of his reactions just sort of pop out. So probably, given that feels like he's the most of me. Most of myself has gone into Flint. And Noah's aforementioned character arc, a lot of Noah's personality isn't really the kind of person I feel like I am, except for the fact that there's those character flaws. I put a lot of my own, flaws into Noah, but a lot of his strengths are things that I wish I would have, but I don't feel like I have.
So it's most of you, but just not all of you.
Yeah. And to a certain degree, that's probably true for all the characters. There was a phase, like, for a very short period of time where I really wanted to be a goth in high school, and because I just loved the goth look. It was cool, but all I ended up doing was I bought predominantly black T-shirts. That was enough for my family to make fun of me and call me goth, but it wasn't at all anything like what the goth kids in the school were wearing. But, like, Cass has her own wannabe goth thing, and I even call that out. And it's a way of kind of making fun of myself for, all right, if young Cobalt was actually going to try to be a goth, he'd be as much of a poser as Cass appears to be when she's wearing like fishnets to the fundraiser at the first episode. Like, she's not dressed professionally at all, but she's dressed the way she wants to dress, damn it. That was a little bit of me, sure, as well. And there are probably things like that in all the characters.
What's an authentic goth anyway?
Yeah, because it's counterculture, right? So, like, you know, it's all just, it's whatever they, you know, if you are goth if you say you are, right? Or something.
I mean, goth is a state of mind. It's not necessarily, you know, about presentation. It's about, you know, how you view the world and all of those things. I fully subscribe to that. It's not just the look. It's not even only the look, you know, like, but, you know, actually it's interesting you mentioned that about, like, you know, Cass being like, this is how I want to, you know, present myself, and that's that, because I think of all the characters, her arc seems the most focused on her own autonomy, in all senses of the term. There's even, you know, like, there's some decisions she makes in phase 3, again, much later in the comic, so I won't elaborate too much, but there's some decisions that she makes that are clearly like, this is probably not the best idea, but it's what you want to do, and, you know, so her friends have to trust her on that. And I think that's a really interesting point, because that's like something that is very much emblematic of her throughout the entire series, the want to have that sort of self-autonomy and bristling at what has been taken away from her. And she kind of has her own methods to try and reclaim that along the way, outside of, you know, the things she can't immediately change. But, like, overall, I found that her character arc in particular was just very interesting in that, yes, it was very, you know, I'm the typical, I've been TF'd and I didn't want to be TF'd sort of, like, vibe, but there's specific things that she does even within those parameters that sort of, I guess, betray a little bit of, like, yeah, okay, this isn't like what I wanted, but I can make this work for myself. And I think that's, you know, a really cool twist on it.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't really have anything to say. You pretty much nailed it in terms of that. Like, it was just like, yeah, this is the way to treat the character with respect. Like, and that's actually something that I had to learn for myself. There were there were parts of the first few chapters where very much Cass is just a victim in the whole thing, and it's just like, haha, funny shenanigans until it gets real. And and at that point, when it actually got real, is when I for me was when I went and wrote and drew that the final page of chapter 2, Mutation Fluctuation, where she says she and Demetrius go to the zoo, she meets the goat, she gets the wool, and there's that whole exchange, and it's all played for laughs. But, like, this is actually disturbing for Cass. It's a thing where you'll laugh at it later, but much later, definitely not right now. And when she says goodbye to Demetrius, she just slumps against the front door, and she looks at her hands, and she just collapses. And that was the moment where I'm like, yeah, this is getting real. This is like at that point I'm like, I need to treat Cass with respect, because I didn't think about treating characters with respect before. And yet they're fictional characters. Like, there's been a lot of valid, like, literary criticism and stuff about, you know, what authors should or shouldn't do to their characters within, like, different bounds and stuff. But, like, at the end of the day, I feel very much like, yeah, I'm taking these characters on these really fraught journeys. At the same time, though, I don't just want to dump everything on Cass just for laughs or for kicks or for dramatic reasons. She deserves to have happy moments too. And so from then on, I started, and especially, like, just a few weeks after I made that page was when, like, things turned around for Cass and confronting Morty, and Morty changing his tune. So, like, very quickly in that early stage of the comic, it was like, all right, Cass is absolutely getting more agency as the series goes on. Like, that's 100%. Like, she is still stuck with this because that's the story, that's her arc, is to be stuck as a goat. But, like, she does everything possible to make that her own thing. She, you know, so.
Yeah, she's not just an accessory. Yeah, and not a. Yeah, you mentioned passingly, like, oh, it's just a character, you don't have to respect her. But it is important for you to respect the character because the reader will not respect them either. Or they'll be frustrated at the missed potential of a character. The Dragon Ball has that problem. Lots of stories have that problem. Western comics have that kind of problem too. Like, Spider-Man never gets to be happy. Batman never gets to be happy. Doctor Doom never gets to be a better person. Like, I don't know, Venom got to be a fucking superhero. Sabretooth doesn't get to stay dead. Those are different things, like, but the Sabretooth being dead. But the point is that if you're just kind of keeping a character around just because, or having them subjected to certain things, what's the thing that happened in Berserk 2? Hey, I can't talk about Berserk too much. But really, you can tell when a character's just kind of put through the ringer with no recourse, no payoff, no anything like that, and people can pick up on that. So if you don't respect your characters, or at least don't, make it a point as to why they're going through all this, then it just starts to feel like misery porn. Actually, Zill, remember that one comic that I was actually... What? No, it wasn't. I was telling Jack about it. There was a comic that I found, and it was labeled with transformations. So I was just like, okay, what's the point? It has to do with this furry girl. She's very cute, and she's going to school, and everybody's treating her like fucking trash. So much, and she's just being bullied and picked on and insulted, and having actual garbage thrown at her, and this goes on for like 50 fucking pages with like just a small break of like, ooh, is somebody gonna start to care? But no, there isn't even a moment where she comes home and like the mom is just like, oh honey, there'll be time. There's like no respite for her, no respite for the reader either, until at the very end when like something happens that's finally nice and finally gives way to the whole thing and gets the story kind of moving. But there's just so much just thrown on her, and I was just kind of like, why am I reading this? It's just I'm just feeling worse and worse for her, and this doesn't feel like much of a story. It's like, get picked on for being a furry. Okay.
Yeah, that just feels like a slog, honestly.
Yeah, and so it is very good to keep track of whether or not you're respecting a character. There are some people who I think, I think that's why I talk to people more when they mention like, oh, I like putting my characters to the ringer. Well, what for? Because that matters. If you just want to make them miserable for fun, well, sure, fine, go ahead. But as a read for somebody else, they're not going to be into it the same level as you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wanted to pick on the class warfare arc for a little bit because it definitely, to me at least as a reader, it formed what I felt was like the most ambitious and challenging part of the narrative to land just right. And there's a plethora of characters in that arc, both new and old, who have distinct storylines that are all kind of coming to a head. And I was a bit curious as to how you worked to balance all of the individual plot lines and still leave time for what really felt like a very epic X-Men-like face-off towards the end between the warring factions.
It's very heartening to hear that you found that class warfare was balanced, because like working on it for the years that I worked on it, it felt like spinning 100 plates, and I was just trying to make it all make sense and try and find a way to like, oh, I'm losing the meaning of the story. What's this all about? I gotta find and bring some meaning back, anything at all, like whatever I could think of. And so for a good while there, it was very much just like I was kind of getting lost in the weeds. But like looking back and stepping back to the high level, like this was meant as the finale of sorts for that phase of UTC. It was a lot of the mishaps that were going at the school were coming to a head, and because of that, it was like a conglomeration of a lot of plots that we saw play out in earlier chapters, but also a few new things that I was implying were happening behind the scenes. We didn't quite see all of it. This was the story that brought it all out into the open, and in order to really make it feel like it had to truly feel like a finale, I felt it was important to honor each of the major characters in some way. I had the entire cast present for it, and either they had a part of their character arcs that developed further during that two-parter, or even if they may not have advanced as characters, they still got one or two big moments to shine on their own. As I was writing, I basically just kept a mental list of everybody who should have some of that focus, and I looked for opportunities anywhere to just slip in a cool moment for them or a developing moment. Oh, this is actually a good moment for so-and-so because they can experience this thing and that'll bring them a little bit further in their own arc. Like trying to place people in the right positions to show that they've evolved further. Like Noah tries to talk Cass out of asking Flint to stop the machine, to do something dangerous to stop the machine. And Noah sticking up for Flint is a way to evolve the fact that just back in Fur Will Fly, just a chapter before, Noah had unwittingly contributed to something that was perceived as bad involving Flint, although different characters have a different perspective on it. But so that helped give Noah a little bit of his own like redemption in a way to try and stick up for Flint. And there were all sorts of things like that interspersed throughout. I established a little bit more of Ash and Demetrius as characters before it was revealed in the comic that they have a relationship. In part one, I think it was in part one, Kestrel escapes, and as a way of doing that, she trashes a sweater that Demetrius had given her to cover up. And like it was a tiny little moment, but I'm like, I can make this a character moment. I was always looking at things like, this could be a character moment. That could be a character moment. And so yeah, and also again, it goes back to like, because it'd been so long since I wrote the very first few pages of the chapter, like I was getting into like, I started writing the chapter in 2014. I finished drawing the comic in 2020? No, 2019. So it was like 5 years.
5 years, yeah.
I kept continuously just going back and reading it from the beginning because it's like, you know, at the bare minimum, this had to feel like it was all one story. And if I completely diverted into some other thing and didn't bring back some of the themes from the beginning of the comic, it wouldn't have felt that way.
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting way to have viewed it. And obviously, you know, to manage such an important arc over the span of 5 years, I mean, that takes a lot of like, you know, being very much keeping track of things, and I can imagine it really did feel like you were spinning a lot of plates all at once, especially with, you know, I think how you built up the two kind of broad factions in the school at the time. And I know I saw this in some of the author notes for some of the pages, but it definitely felt like there was a little bit of X-Men that was bleeding into how you were kind of at least framing it overall.
I'm a huge fan of the big comic book teams that when a TV series or a comic book, whatever's like an ongoing thing, I get movies have to limit their focus to specific star characters. But when it comes to making a series with an ensemble, it's very nice to see when all the characters are getting proper service overall. Like some characters can drop out for a few episodes or a few issues, and they can come back and do something cool later. It's like figuring out which plate, and going back to the spinning plates metaphor, which plate is wobbling right now. And if you leave a character wobbling for too long, not only does the character stop becoming like a contributing part to the story, but fans that were interested in that character start being like, I kept coming back for that character, and I haven't seen them do anything interesting in 5 months. 5 episodes, 5 weeks, whatever. It's like, so you mentioned the X-Men, which is a great example, but the example I actually kept holding myself to was Justice League, the DCAU Justice League cartoon, because I was obsessed with this is minutia, but like I was obsessed with the fact that the writers were confident enough to not put all 7 Leaguers in every single episode. They picked specific Leaguers that worked for that episode, and if they didn't work, they didn't try to shoehorn them in. And so I have a thing where, and this is me, I don't know where I pull this rule from, but like this is the rule that I convince myself is true. If it's a main character, they've got to be in every episode no matter what. They could just have a cameo, they could be the main star of the show, but like they have to be in every episode. If they're not, it must be for some very important reason. But the side characters, they can come in and out. I kept a list the same way that as I was watching Justice League, I'm like, all right, the Flash hasn't been in any episode this season. When's Flash going to show up? He's been missing in my chart for weeks. And then Flash comes back and has like 3 great episodes. And I'm like, all right, awesome. I kept the exact same type of list for UTC. And again, I'm just thank you for indulging me on this, because this is like the most pedantic story that probably could come out of developing UTC. But I did keep this list of, all right, when was the last story we saw Demetrius? When was the last story we saw 13 in? And if it's been too long, if it's been like 2 or 3 chapters, I'm putting them in the next one, and I'm giving them something to do.
Yeah. No, that, I think those kinds of insights are the reason why we like asking these kinds of questions, because it's like, from a reader perspective, I can tell there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, but I don't quite know all the minutia of like, how you're keeping track of these things. So that's honestly really interesting to hear that you had that kind of a running list, and you're like, okay, if it's been too long, I got to sub them in. We got to have something for them to do. Because, then it also potentially takes the story in new directions, and also surprises yourself in terms of how are these characters going to react to whatever it is that's going on in a particular chapter.
Yeah, it can't always be 7 of 9 and the Doctor learning new things about humanity every week.
Yep. But when they do, it's fun and it's great, and it's just like, oh man, I can't wait until the next time they finally get the picture on why they should be this way or that way.
Yeah, it is great, but like, I as much as I love chocolate, I don't want to have it for every meal. Like, those episodes are some of the best of Voyager, but like, give Harry Kim something interesting to do. He's got potential, seriously.
And then they fulfilled it by making him an existential horror.
Yeah,
just like
I dearly love Voyager, and even I can't deny the truth in those words.
It's not even like I don't even know what they could have done with Harry Kim to make him a better character. Like, but there has to be something. A good writer will find a way to make any character work to serve the story, and it's just like I'm more. It's not that I saw untapped potential in Kim. It's that I knew that they weren't tapping him for anything, and I'm like, I just want to know more about him. Like, we know, but at the beginning of the series, we know a few things about him, but at the end of the series, we know the same few things about him, practically. Like, he never got to grow. I'm like, I want to know who this character could have been. I don't know. I didn't have any expectations, but I wanted something.
I think there was an antagonistic slant to how that show was made and written, if I'm not mistaken.
Reportedly, Garrett Wang did have, at least in the later years, and I don't know if it was, I don't know whether the chicken came first or the egg came first, but Garrett Wang definitely, there was, he talks about it now, but like, I think there were rumors that even back at the time Voyager was being produced, that he had some beef with some of the writers and producers, so they were purposely keeping him on the down low and not giving him stuff to do. But that doesn't explain that the same producers in Enterprise didn't do anything with Travis Mayweather, Anthony Montgomery's character, and almost nothing to do. Almost as short-shifted was Hoshi Sato.
Yeah. On behalf of the Portuguese, I apologize for Brandon Braga. That's all I'll say.
Fuck. You're gonna have to explain that to me later.
Sorry, go ahead.
Brandon Braga is not going to turn this into the Star Trek podcast by any means, as much as that would be itself a transformation sequence. But I gotta say this. I gotta go on record and say this. Brandon Braga wrote some of my favorite Next Gen episodes, and
he did.
He also wrote some of my least favorite of every other show. But Cause and Effect, my favorite Next Generation episodes. So like, it's really like, it's the right person for the right job. And when Brandon was given specific things to do, he did fantastic. But like, it really just felt like towards the end of Voyager going into Enterprise was very much just like, okay, get some fresh blood in here. Got to get more perspectives and new ideas in here. Please, please, please.
Yeah. Oh no, I completely agree. I guess then I'll also add you're welcome on behalf of the Portuguese, but also like broadly speaking, I did feel that way towards a lot of the latter part of Voyager and into Enterprise, which I ended up skipping, which I know is sacrilege. I have to go back and watch it still, but I felt that way as well. Anyway, sorry, this is not a Star Trek show, but I do have to indulge that because I have you here. I'm curious then, in the spirit of all the things that have happened in Star Trek, were there any sort of like transformations that did end up making it into UTC that you felt were more for show or audience interest than for yourself as an author?
This is an awesome question because yes, a little bit. Obviously, you usually if you want to entertain an audience, you're right to entertain yourself first, and the audience will follow because you get better material out of it that way. But also, since UTC was specifically intended to be my love letter back to the Transformation fandom, I wanted to represent, and I still do, if I continue UTC, we're going to continue to see more different types of TFs. But I really wanted to present as many themes of TF as possible, even if they didn't have as much appeal to me. To be specific, the main first thing comes to my mind was there was a very, very brief weight gain that Morty goes through in one of the chapters, and I'm not a fan of weight gain. I've drawn some weight gain, and I'm absolutely not going to yuck anyone's yum for sure. But for me particularly, I was worried that if I made that a full-on A plot or B plot to a story, because I couldn't really connect with it the way that weight gain fans truly might have wanted to, I was like, all right, I'm going to give this some service, but I don't want to write a subpar story and end up having it feel like it was half-assed, or it just was even in a way that even might disappoint weight gain fans. I don't know. But the bottom line was I'm like, all right, I want to put some of this representation stuff in here, but at the same time, if there's an opportunity to do it in a more drawn out way later, give it some more proper due, I could totally do that. And then real quickly, a couple other ones. Katsuko's Bear TF, I've come around to it, but actually when I didn't get the idea to turn Katsuko into a living teddy bear until I was in the process of drawing Class Warfare, writing that story. So I did start to seed a few things that would lead into it for the next chapter after that. But I didn't know if I was going to transform her at all. And then this idea came well, her bears do this thing, but what if she turned into one of her bears? Because at that time, we were starting, it was 2016, 2017, we were starting to really see a big push of toy TF. And so this is all right, this is something I can work in here. And this is actually, if any Transformation fans are interested in checking out some vintage stuff, I wish I could remember the issue number, but there was a Superman Action Comics issue from the 80s that featured the Toyman. And there's a story where he went to try and kidnap a bunch of children using living sleeping bags. The sleeping bags looked like innocent, basic, cozy sleeping bags, but as the child's sleeping in it, there's a multi-panel sequence where the bag around the child turns into a massive stuffed animal creature and walks away with the kid sleeping unsuspectingly inside of it. And that was the genesis of the idea that, Katsuko's bears, they can become these massive protectors. If the child's in physical harm, they can inflate an airbag and cover them up and keep them safe until rescue. I got that from that issue of Action Comics.
Excellent.
That's amazing.
I enjoy that sort of thing. It's because the surprising... God, actually, speaking of Batman, it just makes me think also of the Batmobile, the Tim Burton Batmobile with the fucking armor mode. The shielding mode is one of my favorite things. And that's still my favorite Batmobile.
Yeah.
But,
same.
Yeah. Fucking... It's great that you're adapting the ideas. You say living stuffed bear, and I went to Cassette Beast because there's a Cassette Beast that it's like a torn up toy bear, and it's done in a zombie motif. It's really good.
Yeah, it's very good. I was curious then. Obviously, UTC's kind of come to a sort of hiatus/end hybrid, as it were, with the end of Phase 3. And I was wondering what the overall reaction has been from your audience towards you in terms of that kind of decision and how you feel about those reactions.
So Just a quick footnote. The Action Comics issue, it's either 657 or 687. Not sure which, but that was if anybody listening was looking for that.
There we go.
So this is something that I am extremely grateful for, because I was honestly worried, especially after hiatus after hiatus after hiatus and dragging the comic on for so long. And finally getting it to the conclusion of Phase 3, I was really kind of like mentally bracing for what the reaction to the from the fan base would be, and like everyone that has reached out to me has been supportive about it. They a lot of the messages, average out to, like, this has been a great ride. Thank you for seeing it through to an ending, if not the ending, definitively. Still up in the air for a while. We'll see. But like the amount of just support that readers have given and wished me luck on my next comic project. Some people have said, it would be awesome to see some more UTC do a Phase 4, but also, like, whether you do or not, I hope that you continue to find joy in making comics. And some people have said, I'm looking forward to whatever your next story is, whatever it is. And that is such a massive, that's a massive outpouring of faith from readers. So yeah, I'm so grateful to everyone who's commented and has been reading UTC, whether you just picked it up a few months ago, whether you're just learning about it now and you're going to go start reading it, or if you've been reading for since maybe the beginning and have been waiting through all the long hiatuses for us to finally get here. It's been fantastic. I'm so lucky to have the fans that I do.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that, because I feel like, and I guess the reason why I had even thought of this question is, sometimes we've talked a little bit on the show about, people are always looking for more. Is this going to be a sequence, that kind of a thing. So I'm really glad that people have been not only respectful of your kind of creative decision, and also like your decision to kind of put your creative energy towards something different, but also like encouraging you to pursue what it is that you want to do next, and also not bemoaning that there won't be more, but instead being like, I'm really happy that you stuck it out and gave us what you did. I think that's a really nice thing to hear, and I'm really glad that the audience overall has been very like mature and respectful of that decision, because and you can opine on this as maybe, but like I feel like sometimes there is a pressure that people have, both perceived or otherwise, to keep something going if it's been like successful. And sometimes it takes a lot of courage to be like, this is actually the point where my creative train is stopping for now, and maybe I'll come back, but this is where I need to actually stop so that I can go and do something else and still maintain my creative integrity and energy.
Yeah, for sure. There was definitely a time way back. There was a time when I felt like obligated to finish the story. But like, and this goes right back to what Libra was saying earlier about like feelings that, one might owe the community something, even though they don't really technically owe anything, but that feeling of obligation that one person puts on oneself. And like, if there was, and there were times, I'll be real, there were times, like particularly in the middle of class warfare, when I was really struggling to write the comic, and I started feeling like I'd completely lost control of the narrative and wasn't sure how to bring it back, and seeing how much time it had taken and how much time I was putting in and how stressful I was about it and everything, and being like, maybe this should be the end. Maybe I just write class warfare to be the conclusion. But there was absolutely no question in my mind that there was no question in my mind that I was going to stand up and leave UTC unfinished. Not just because I felt I owed people for like hanging on to the comic for so long, but also because I can't just let that happen. I've got to, even if it would have been a fast, half-assed, quick wrap-up, at least something to conclude the series. Very glad that I was able to, get out of that and sort of work my way back to getting the comic back on a good narrative track. But that whole thing of like, just, if you're not, and I'm speaking to the audience now, if you're out there creating something, a long form narrative, of any type, and you're not feeling it anymore, and all you feel like you're just obligated to complete it. If it's a passion project for you, and the passion is gone, it's just a project. It's okay to just walk away from it if you absolutely have to. If it's bringing you no joy, no reward, especially if you're not being paid for it, why are you truly sticking with it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I agree with that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
There's just too many times where people can get stuck on something because they believe it has to be finished, and it's a mistake. It's a beginner's mistake, I think, for art too. There's something that probably a good number of people have been told, which is don't fall in love with your own work, which seems kind of like, I don't know, like to build an antagonism to your own shit and to be like really self-critical. The message you're really supposed to take from it is to have enough distance with whatever you're doing to be able to walk away from it, or to look at it critically so that you can make it into something that you enjoy. Sometimes you really just have to start the same idea over again, and you may miss having some elements of it or something, but you wouldn't have been happy with it because maybe you're struggling to execute this one thing or include that or whatever. It's a very thoughtful way to approach what you're doing with your time and your effort, which if you're doing something like Cobalt did, it's a huge ask, and with plots and characters and resolutions and and trying to make it all satisfying and mean something. It's more than a lot of people really consider. I mean, I guess that's why people got to be very careful, or at least more careful about how they decide to criticize things too, because expectations can easily fall through, and sometimes that's not even really a problem depending on the media. I don't know. There's a lot to talk about with that, but yeah, don't feel pressured to just see something through to the end just because you started it. It's not always great, and it's not even a form of quitting either. It's sparing yourself the trouble.
Yeah.
I can't emphasize that enough. Like, you really are sparing yourself at that point, and you do have to put your health before the health of your creation. I cannot stress that enough. Especially when it's something for passion, sometimes you really do need to actually walk away for the energy to eventually come back to you later. I mean, I was joking about this the other day, but I stopped making personal art for myself for 2 years, and it's only now that after I was like, I'm not going to do that anymore, that my brain was like, okay, but what if you did anyways? And you need to have sometimes that time and space to actually have the passion return, because like you said, Cobalt, otherwise it's just a project, and if you're not getting paid for it in particular, it's like, who are you making it for at that point? Because if you're not feeling good while you're making it, you're just being detrimental to your own mental health long term.
Yeah. It's don't torture yourself. You wouldn't keep putting your hand in a fire. Don't keep going back to this project that's not doing anything but stressing you out more and eating up your time that you could spend doing something more constructive, more more geared towards your well-being. Beat that video game you've wanted to beat. I've absolutely been in a situation where I've withheld entertainment from myself because I'm finish one more UTC and then you can go watch that movie you bought on Blu-ray. There have been times where I did that. You know what ended up happening? I didn't draw UTC that night, and I didn't watch that movie. I went to bed miserable. Yeah. And it's that's not healthy. It's
no, it's not healthy.
It's you just you got to find, if the passion's gone out, figure out, all right, what can I change about this project that will actually get me to be invested in it again? And if you look through it and you're like, all right, there's nothing I can add or change about what I'm making to make myself fall in love with this project again, that's probably the last recourse that you could have to at least try to salvage something. That's how and I hope this advice is helpful to someone out there. That's how I got through Class Warfare. I dump on it a whole lot. Zill, you've praised the story more than than I would have ever expected anyone to, just by saying that it was consistent. But like from my perspective, it was such a different experience than what anyone's reading, and I'm so glad that you and anyone else out there like did not see it the way I saw it, all behind the scenes in terms of all the stress. But all I think about is, not all, but like a lot of what I think about when I think about class warfare isn't the story itself. I think about what I personally was going through mentally for all those years, and it's not fun. But when, like, I finally was like, put my foot down and said, find a way to make this fun again. And I ended up coming up with new threads or a new spin on an existing conclusion or character arc that I was working towards from the beginning. But I'm like, all right, we'll get there in a different direction. We'll take the scenic route, or we'll do this other thing, or maybe this character is actually kind of good after all. Maybe there's some interesting stuff in that. And slowly but surely, I found things that brought my interest back into the comic, and some of those decisions that ended up being drawn out in the concluding pages of Class Warfare, a lot of people were very positive about. And it's like, those are things that I never would have written from the beginning if I'd sat down in 2014 and written the whole story arc out. Those were brand new things that I added just to make it more interesting for me and actually rewarding, so I could sit down and say, all right, I'm actually interested in seeing this page drawn because this thing that I like is in it.
Elements of storytelling that I also like people to be open to is the idea that you can discover things along with the characters. You get to know the characters like the readers do, and that is a very that's a good thing to keep in mind if you're feeling overwhelmed about something. If you feel like you haven't plotted it all out, you know, it's a journey too. The creative process is supposed to be the thing that we are supposed to be enjoying, not necessarily the product.
Yeah. I was gonna make more of a silly joke. I was gonna say, so was the fan favorite buff werewolf cat a late edition, or was that always something that was going to show up?
That was, I had that in mind. I can't remember when I came up with the idea for it, but it was one of those ideas where I'm like, oh, that would be great to just add in wherever I can find a chance for it. And that in Class Warfare is where I made it in, where I'm like, all right, I gotta, Ken's gonna be testing the transformation device on a few of his new allied students. So what transformations do I have in my back pocket that I could give them? And that one was my favorite of them all, because it's that was the thing where, like, a lot of like fursuits now, they've got like the glowing components and stuff, and that's borne out from a lot of fursonas who have fluorescent parts or lots of glowy bits and things like that. And so that's so fascinating, because it's one of those things that really skirts the line of what's natural and what's not natural. I mean,
right.
That's a whole other conversation in terms of like walking, talking animals, but so like this idea of, who says that some creatures can't just have like glowing inner parts or geometric patterns on their fur that just naturally grow there. They're not tattoos. So that was me adding a little bit of that to those furries that have characters like that, or are interested in characters like that have the glow. And that's also why there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek conversation about it, but it comes at it from a way of, hey, this is actually cool. Okay, I guess I don't get it, but cool for you. And like, of course, the one who does transform, it's a form that he picked, and so he loves it and he stands up for it. And is just fine if he never changes back again. So it's representing another piece of like the massive variety of transformations and types of anthros that there are in our community.
Yeah. No, I dig it, and I think the reaction, at least from what I could see in some of the comments, seemed to be positive towards that too. So that was nice to see.
Yeah. I do occasionally Google search the comic. As difficult as UTC, the acronym, is to Google, Urgent Transformation Crisis searches, I did find a Reddit thread where it was like, furries be like, and it was that picture of that, his name's Chuck, turned into his glowy werewolf cat self. And that was so amazing to see. I was like, awesome. They got it. Somebody actually liked this. This is so great. It's for you.
Fantastic. Yeah, it is. I guess a last question I want to ask on UTC, because I know there were other topics I wanted to get to, but if there was anything you could go back and change about it, what would it be and why?
If I could snap my fingers and make this happen, I'd completely rewrite Phase 1. And not just because I learned a lot as a writer since UTC started, that sure is the case. UTC made me such a much better writer because of all the things that it, like, because of how long I've been working on it, really. Just keep plugging away and you get better at whatever you do. But there was also, looking back, I saw a lot of missed potential in the early in Phase 1 to do more to really get our heads into like what Cass and Flint and Noah's transformations are actually like. Like, what was it? We saw bits and pieces, but like more opportunities to figure out like what was it like for Flint to wake up to and discover he could glide. Like, he talks about it, but like we didn't actually get that moment of realization for him. I played it off as like a shock reveal, and that kind of robbed us all of oh well. One of the coolest things about a post-TF story is those first seconds where the character is taking stock of themselves and figuring out how to walk again if their legs are changed a little bit, or if there's a massively different part of their anatomy. In this case, Flint has these wing flaps that are on his arms. Like, what's that got to be like for him? He's also significantly shorter. I think I shrunk him by like a foot or something. At first. And then, so things like that. But also, Cass did go back to school as a goat, full force. She didn't try to disguise herself. But like, what's like the first normal day of her classes go? We only saw her briefly confront like the camera crew. It was just an awkward moment. But then, oops, the massive werpoodle Karis has escaped again. We've got to do that now. And now no one cares about what Cass looks like because there are more important things to worry about. How did Noah's dynamic with his family change? Like, we barely see Noah's family at all. And so, like, all that stuff, I would love to just go back and rewrite all of Phase 1. It just tune up a little bit of the dialogue and stuff. But, like, in general, flesh it out, maybe add a couple of chapters. And I don't even know how that would help or hurt the narrative flow, but it really just feels like there weren't enough chances, and I blew my chances to do some interesting stuff that worked in the early days. But if we were to go look at it now, like, it would be like, well, they've been like this for 16 chapters. Why are we now focusing on how the character feels about X, Y, or Z? I tried to do that wherever possible, but like it's usually in terms of like, oh yeah, in hindsight, I've learned to cope with it by doing this. We didn't actually see them learn how to cope with it, which is like, that's one of the things about transformation stories that I like that I didn't really give myself a chance to do because I was just distracted focusing on a different part of the story. But
no, you can't do everything.
No, for sure. And I'm not going to go back and redo, like, I'm not going to go back and redo everything just because, I think I can do it better with the second run. Like, I'm going to move on and do different things and stuff. But there actually are a few things that I did go back and change. And some of the things were to trim up one thing or another or to add consistency here or there. But the big changes, things I've spent like more than just 10 minutes on, there were a few parts where I wrote or depicted characters in an insensitive way. And I won't get into it. It's called out on a few places on the website. If you look in the notes, I do mention which pages, but like basically it's me looking back and realizing, okay, this part is not kind, not just to the characters themselves, but to any reader that might identify with that character. So I did some corrections there and updated it everywhere it is on the internet. There are probably copies of those pages out there still, like, and it's just okay, I was more ignorant back then.
It's fine.
Sorry, I'm going on too long about it.
It's okay.
Just to anybody reading it, or anybody who thinks back like, oh my god, you shouldn't have done that. Well, okay, 10 fucking years. Okay, what do you want?
More.
What do you really want? It's done. You can take something and know that it has changed, and there you go. Don't you like change? It's good that it changed from one thing to another, right? Don't get fucked. Exactly. Don't get all fucked up about it. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah. It's fine. I swear it's fine.
Yeah. The one thing I do actually want to say, and I guess this isn't quite like a thing to change, but I think this was done in collaboration with a different writer. I just want to say I really enjoyed chapter 8 focused on Karis, and I know she doesn't get like as much to do later in the story, but that felt almost like something that, like, you know, was in hindsight of phase 1 ended up like being put in to like kind of add a dimension to the story overall, and it was a really nice change. So I do want to just give a shout out to that chapter in particular because I really enjoyed it.
And yeah, absolutely. Give a shout out to my dear friend Jeff who wrote that. That was something that it was the only chapter of UTC that was written by somebody else, and they came to me with a couple of ideas. The Karis one was the one that really felt like, oh, this is great. Like, this is such a, like, talk about like bringing fresh perspectives into work on a series. I never would have written that Karis chapter. But what they proposed to do just absolutely blew me away, just conceptually, and I'm like, I totally would love that. So I commissioned him to write that chapter, and it was fantastic, and it changed the trajectory of Karis's entire arc, because I wasn't planning on doing anything substantial with her after that. She might have been like a minor antagonist recurring, but like, this chapter took her in a totally different direction that just makes her character just so much better. It makes it really a lot more interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. Awesome. So I did want to talk a little bit just about plotting TF broadly, because obviously, you know, comics has always been a big part of your output. I think since like 2001, you've done at least 5 distinct series or storylines, which I think is, again, just incredible and a testament to, you know, your interest and passion for them. Given many of them have incorporated TF to some degree, I'm curious to learn more about how you kind of conceptualize plotting out transformations as part of a grander story, like what the thought process is in your head behind it.
Yeah, this is like a really fascinating topic for me. Like, even like, it goes back to like just me wanting to be a storyteller in the first place. So like, thinking about all of the potential for what it's like to become something else, to gain a different perspective, whether you're talking about like a body swap or a full physical transformation, or a bit of a change of mental, like a change of attitude, like, oh, I didn't mean to say that or do that, but I just did. How do I feel about that? Plotting them out, to me, I love a good, like, just, I love a good TF as much as anyone else, just in terms of like, just, it's cool to explore just how the person changes, but I love when a great narrative can pair that. And any good narrative, like whether it's transformation or not, any good narrative is going to need some kind of stakes. It's going to need a beginning, a middle, and an end. You have to feel like you went on a journey, even if the journey is simply just a person getting out of bed and walking across their room and getting dressed for the day. Like, that's a journey. They're in a different place than they started out. You didn't have to go far, you didn't have to do much, but you could still tell an interesting story. And so for transformation, it's really just like, how does the transformation start? What is it like to go through in the process? And what is the end product that you want to get the character to? And is there any way you can add like plot elements that aren't necessarily just, okay, now he grows feathers on his arms and now his arms sprout into wings. Put the character in a situation where something can come out of that beyond just, oh wow, I've grown these awesome wings, or oh, I'm terrified, what's happening, I'm becoming a mutant. Like, do you put them in a social situation where people just all of a sudden see this Birdman appear? Are they like in a checkout line at a store, like, and they have to navigate through the crowded checkout line of, oh, excuse me, and the wings are growing and knocking the candy bars off the shelves? Or are they hiking in the woods, and maybe they're lost, and they're like, oh, I don't know where I am, and they come across this like shrine, and it turns them into a it gives them wings, and now they're like, oh wow, I can actually, wow, I can fly, and they're just trying it out and stuff, and they realize, oh yeah, that's right, I was lost, and now I can find my way because I'm seeing over all the trees and stuff, like, just, you know, things like that. I hope that goes some way to answering your question in terms of that.
No, I think it does, and I think that's a really kind of interesting perspective. I think one of the things that and I think Libra and I have talked to this to some degree on the show before. I think one of the interesting things when it comes to telling a story that has transformation as part of it, I think there's sometimes a central tension between writing a TF story versus writing a TF story. And it sometimes, I think there's like a bit of a challenge in terms of where do you put the emphasis and how does that translate out into, like something that a reader wants to pick up and read. And so I guess I was curious to hear what you thought about that. If you feel like there is in fact a tension, or that one should take priority over the other, or they always need to be like completely harmonious, or, I'm kind of spitballing, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts there.
Like, so you use the word tension. It's actually a really good way to look at it. I don't think I've really ever thought of it that way before, but in hindsight, that actually is a great single word to describe the way that I've always kind of looked at stories that have transformation in them, whether they're a foreground or a background element. There is this idea of like, okay, here's what the writer of the story intends to tell, and here's what me, the person watching or reading the story play out, wants to see. I'm sort of like looking like, all right, how's that character going to transform more? Oh, Jasmine's been given a tonic that's going to turn her into a Naga, and oh, she's not done changing. She's changing further. What's the next thing that's going to change? Oh, yeah, right. There's also a plot where she and Aladdin are traveling through dangerous lands to get to a cure.
Yeah.
This is a Disney's Aladdin TV series reference for the 3 people that might not know what I'm talking about.
I was going to say hot snake babes. Yes, I feel like most people know what you're talking about. But anyways, continue.
So the idea of like, all right, so, and honestly, that's actually, in my mind, a great story that bridges that tension, because there are like, it weaves in and out of making the transformation the central element. There are absolutely scenes, especially those scenes where Jasmine has just transformed further, the 2 or 3 points during the episode, and they make that, there's that whole shock moment, there's the obligatory gasps, and Jasmine takes a look at herself and realizes that, like, what she's become. But then also, the characters have to get right back to the adventure, going to find the cure for it. So there's things that don't necessarily have to focus every single moment on, I'm a snake babe now, and I'm transforming further. Oh, look at me. Oh, now I have these poisonous spines, and I've got slitted eyes, and my hair's turning into a hood. And it's like, okay, we're focusing a little bit too much on the TF now, and now the story's getting lost. As much as personally, I would love seeing more and more fan-made sequences that have things like that. But at the same time, it's like, for the story itself, to serve a 22-minute cartoon episode, you need some more meat to that plot. Otherwise, you're just going to have that weird episode of Aladdin where nothing happens except Jasmine just turns into a snake.
Okay.
Which, if that's all a particular person's looking for, fine, awesome, really glad you got what you wanted. But at the same time, it's like, not every member of the audience is going to have that particular interest in, oh, that's all I wanted. It's like, well, how about a story? How about something that actually, like, has a beginning, a middle, and an end, that doesn't just focus on the character changing and everyone's just sitting there looking at her change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's about sincerity. As we said before in a previous episode, the one with Lemon Fawn. Sincerity being that if that is what you want to show, try not to make it more than what it is. If it did have to be, for instance, about Jasmine focusing on the fact that she's becoming a snake or something like that, then do that. But don't pretend that there's got to be like another kind of tension or shoehorn this in or that in. She's going to be the focus, that experience is going to be the focus, and, people will go with it or they won't. But you're honest about it. And as Zil mentioned at the very start, it's a matter of people making like a story either focused around or including it, which sometimes is kind of hard to distinguish. But just for the benefit of people who are listening, you can have you can have cassette piece where the story is that you end up on an island in a world that is not your own, clearly, because things don't make sense. People can turn into things using cassette players and cassettes and music and things like that, and everybody comes from a different kind of reality that is similar to yours, but can be anything from like shockingly different to just a minor inconsistency, and you just have to grapple with the fact that there are monsters and they're weird and that you can become one. And then they have discussions about that, and it's a central thing that you can turn into a monster and do battle, and other people can do it too. And the whole story is built around those circumstances, so transformation is a really big focus. But let's not kid ourselves, they don't forget that the stakes of what you're trying to do are really central to it. They bring in a few things like, oh, I was listening to this song for too long and I almost kind of forgot that I wasn't supposed to be this kind of monster. Or, oh man, when we fused together, it was kind of weird and I felt your memories and your feelings and stuff, and it was kind of like whatever. But, those things get discussed. How does this work? Nobody knows. They ask some questions. But the stakes are what they are, and they don't forget that. Mm-hmm. That is the key to it. So, and to further the point one last time, it's a matter of how some people write something and they want to make a character and they want to make and they want to world build a little bit, but they'll kind of like throw that stuff in as kind of like an expectation. Oh, there has to be this. There has to be that. There has to be something that happens after. There has to be. There doesn't have to be anything. Just stick to the point of what you're trying to make.
Yeah, for real. And like for a story like Cassette Piece, which I haven't played, but hearing what you described it as, like, it sounds like the stakes. Am I correct in inferring that the stakes that are actually in Cassette Beast don't necessarily have to do with the transformations themselves? The transformations are simply one of the main mechanics to achieving a solution to those stakes?
Yes. It's the way that you get around you're put in a situation where you're like, here, do this or you won't be safe, and then you do it, and it's like, start of your adventure, haha, welcome to your new life. Nobody understands this, but blah, blah, blah. And none of this is a spoiler, but you want to go home, whatever home is.
Okay.
So
which you don't even know.
Yeah, those are your stakes. But going out and turning into different monsters is a huge linchpin and a huge key to what you're actually doing. It's not the only part, but, even in the game, and this is one of the cool things, by the way, you get powers that you can use in the overworld. So you temporarily, like, you grow wings for a moment to like flap, to do like a double jump or to glide. You can grow like a bunch of vines around you in like the form of a ball, so you can climb surfaces. You can run ultra fast and leave a trail of flame. You become less human with time, but that's not really the point of it. It's the means to your end, and they do elaborate on it some, but again, it's nicely woven together, but if you do want to talk about how fun it is to become a stained glass angel, please do that. Just try not to make it too much deeper.
Oh man.
Yeah,
well then, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Zil.
No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna riff off of what you just said, Libra, and be like, and to have stories that don't necessarily have the transformation be necessarily the instigating factor of the conflict or the reason that the conflict exists. It's simply just a means to an end, but it can be an entertaining means. Could even be a fun means for the characters, and doesn't necessarily have to be like the TF itself doesn't necessarily have to be something that needs to be resolved. It's just a thing, which kind of it just reminded me of, I wish I could remember his name, the director who made the anime movies Weathering with You and Your Name. The stories that they make, the stories that director and that studio have made, they have a lot of TF or TF adjacent kind of stuff where there are normal human characters who find out that, oh, there's a power in me, or I've gone through a change, and that change isn't necessarily the plot. It's simply just a circumstance the character is in that buoys them to resolve the larger plot that they're in. And during the movie, they just sort of cope with it. And it doesn't even those particular aspects, even when there are physical transformations, they don't necessarily always have to take center stage to the plot to be a rewarding and visible element of the story. And those are really fun to also watch, even though the transformation's not front and center all the time, or even almost ever, which is fine because it doesn't need to be, to still be there as an important part.
Yeah, so first of all, I just need to harp on your name for a second. The director you're thinking of is Makoto Shinkai, and the studio is Comics Wave Films.
Thank you.
For people who haven't watched it, it's very funny because the thing that stands out the most to me about it is actually something my sister said to me, because we were on a plane, ironically, to Japan, and I was watching it, and she kept saying, her description of me watching the movie was, I kept looking over, you were laughing, blah, 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 and then at one point I just looked over and you were dead silent and you were sobbing. That's that movie. It is so well done. It is incredibly emotional. The heart that the movie has is just, it checks off so many boxes for me. But to your point as well, the TF is a very central part of the movie, but it never feels like it's somehow also the focus, even though it kind of is. Like, it's hard to describe, but like the way in which the transformation is handled is really deftly done in a way that only enhances the narrative, and it is there to enhance the narrative, to be clear. It is not the central part. And yeah, I could gush about that movie at length, but I don't want to give away too much, so I'll stop there. The thing I was actually going to ask earlier, though, was, since you and Libra have both expressed very kind of strong opinions, I think, in terms of how you like to see it, are there any stories where you felt like their TF took so much focus away that it interfered with the story? And are there any examples that come to mind where that balance wasn't really struck?
Yeah, I've been trying to think of specific examples, and honestly, I've come up empty.
No, that's fair.
There probably have been, but honestly, because they didn't quite work for me, I just didn't remember them. Mm-hmm. It feels more like, no, unfortunately, I just don't have anything.
Yeah,
I can imagine that there are stories out there that do it, maybe. Often the case is the opposite. It's like, oh, I wish that movie had more TF, but they didn't have the budget for it, or it just wasn't that important to the plot, but I would have liked it to be more important to the plot. But honestly, even movies like The Fly, where all everyone ever talks about in that movie is the Fly transformation, which is a major, major, major focus. Very, very effectively well done. Gross as heck, but really fascinating. And so well done, just artistically and mechanically. But even that, watching it, I'm like, I never felt like they're spending too much time on this. And I don't know if maybe that's just my particular preference of I'm actually so happy that for once a transformation is being drawn out so much, and there's still a plot going on. There's still a slow burn plot line that is tense as hell in The Fly, David Cronenberg specifically, if it wasn't obvious. But even that movie, it's okay, I'm totally fine with the amount of TF content. It's not taking focus away because the story so much is centered around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, if anything, that really only happens with the fandom or people who write some of their own stuff, and I think they get lost in what they want versus what they think they need to put in for a story to be a story or satisfying. And that's why you don't really see that in other narratives. There's a lot to say about media where people turn into things or whatever, but when it comes to those, it's what gets ignored that is the problem. So it's not even that there's too much focus on it. There can be a lot of focus on it, and then they don't ask the right questions, or they don't propose the right solutions. And it all has to do with, how does this fit in with the story, and are you paying attention to what you're doing? The fact that, okay, let's talk about Nimona. Nimona changes all the time. Shapeshifting is a huge part of her whole identity. It's part of her. It almost is her. Is that too much of the focus? No. It doesn't take away from, our other protagonists' plight. It doesn't take away from, like, the rest of, like, the world. And the reason it's also good is because she tries everything she can think of with her powers, and that is how you make it satisfying. But say they were in a situation like, can't you just turn into this or that and get out of it, and then they don't, then you start having complaints. That's usually what happens in media where somebody can, like, transform. If you can change into anything, you have to be a creative problem solver writing it. Otherwise, you're going to be frustrating people. But in the fandom, I think it's kind of a backwards thing where they really, really want to include this thing, and so they really want to focus on it. But then almost as an afterthought or a secondary thing, like, how do I have a plot revolved around this? And then you get the opposite problem.
Yeah. And also, like, on this topic, one thing that it feels like it's important to point out is, like, and speaking about, like, perspectives from within the fandom and perspectives from the general public that aren't necessarily, like, super into TF specifically as a narrative vehicle, like, there's a time and a place to do all these things, and it's up to artistic interpretation, whatever you feel like you need to do for your story. But, like, I definitely fall I just feel like if the TF really doesn't need to be the major focus, don't just make it the major focus because a bunch of us would love it. Like, it's like, if there's something about it that just doesn't work for the story, then it kind of would fall on the lines of any type of fan service, story, a lot of media that just is like, oh, we all know why you're really here. You're here to gawk at this thing or that thing, and it's just like, okay, but please tell a story that works, and don't just interrupt the story to show off this thing or have this sequence that's supposed to get us intrigued or anything like that. But it just, whatever really does work within the story, which is, it's nice to see, like, when there are TFs that aren't necessarily a central element, but they can, like, duck and weave through the story in an organic way. But even stories that feature TF that, like, I would have loved to see more of that TF in that story, but thinking about how that could be expanded, it probably would have been detrimental to the story. Like, going back to the 10th Kingdom, the only reason I started watching the 10th Kingdom was because in some of the advertisements they were advertising a hair TF, like hair growth, and I was like, I've never ever see this done, so I'm absolutely watching this miniseries. And it's a great miniseries. It's just on its own. It's fantastic. But the Rapunzel thing only happens for, like, half of one episode. But that's all you need. I would have loved more, but, like, they wove it into the narrative, and it worked as a temporary plot for them to resolve. But, like, it ran its course, and that was it. And as much as I would have loved to see the main character dealing with long hair for the entire rest of the adventure, that just wasn't in the cards, and there wouldn't have been no place for it, and the story probably would have suffered for it because they're moving on to different things. Yeah. So it's like, sorry, I already made my point. I'll stop.
No, I was just gonna say I thought it was interesting, using the term woven, because I think the other question I kind of had was, when it comes to stories with transformation in them, I generally find, and this is just my opinion, this is not an authoritative list, but I often find that, like, transformation stories will fall into one of three buckets. Either you have, like, kind of a focused transformation burn where you're focused just on the change. You might have a TF occurring and then you're trying to reverse it, or you have a TF occurring and then you're exploring the ramifications. And so I guess my question for you is, do you think that any or all of these can work when it comes to crafting a story, or do you feel like only some can actually be woven into a fulsome plot?
For sure, any of these can be woven into a story. There's like maybe more or less difficulty. You may need to work a little harder here or there. It depends on what the circumstances of your particular story are, what the setting is. But honestly, like, anything can. I believe that anything can become a story. You just need a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you have a story. The stakes don't need to be super high. They don't need to be super low, or they can be super high, or they can be super low. And when you're working on TF-focused stories with like a slow transformation burn, tells like the default thing, the thing that we usually see the most, and that it's very entertaining, is someone trying to hide the slow changes, like whether like if they're starting to grow fur, they start wearing baggier clothes to hide that until like then their teeth start growing into fangs or things like that. And how do they hide that? And it's like just seeing how they cope with every individual incremental change. That can be part of a plot. You can weave that into like, oh, I still have to show up for work every day. How do I do that when I continuously change? And then exploring the ramifications with no hope of going back. Like, that doesn't mean that your story is over. Anyone who's experienced a traumatic event in life, not to pair TF with traumatic events like 1-to-1 to compare it, but like it can be done, but I don't mean anyway. Yeah. But
no, I get what you mean.
Your life doesn't just stop, and you don't just stop changing because something has fundamentally altered your trajectory in life. Like, there is more after that, and whether or not you can go back to the way things were before that defining event, it doesn't mean that you can't still evolve into a newer, more fully grown person, whatever that means for that situation that you're in.
Change is not permanent, but change is. That's how yes. I like it spelled out. Thank you, Rush.
Yes, a lot of great stories do this. A classic example is Misfile, the webcomic where a character goes through a TG, and then there's the secondary character. Well, the second main character, she goes through a minor but significant age regression, and they're stuck with it for the duration. And
minor but significant?
She de-ages 2 years. And what's significant about that is she just graduated high school. So now, the most formative 2 years of her life just ended, and now she's faced with the prospect of going through it all again. She was ready to be done with it. That's the tension there. And the other character changes from a male to a female. But they're both in the situation where they know they're stuck with it. They eventually learn why it happened and why they can't go back. And they just, the rest of the comic is about them coping with it, hoping maybe one day that they can get through it. But for the most part, there are just other plot lines that they live through. There are arcs that grow their characters out in ways that don't necessarily keep reminding you that they've changed. Certainly, the comic there are certainly lots of really good things, again, weaving in and out of the characters acknowledging that they're not the same people they were before the comic started. But they don't allow that to define them. They find new ways to evolve as the comic goes on, sometimes in spite of their transformations, and sometimes because of, and sometimes it doesn't matter, because there are still things that you can do even though you've been transformed into another gender, or you've been de-aged. There are just things that you have to go through life and do again, and we all face that.
Yeah, one thing I find really interesting is how this is really, maybe it's not very different, but I guess it's just the way it's vocalized that people want to know about dealing with the circumstance is one of the most like unique things about this whole circle of fans of this. It's just, how must it feel is always the interest. What's it like, and I don't really see that happening with a lot of other media. No, not a lot of people ask what it's like to be Superman. They just like seeing him do shit. Nobody really asks that question, but in this one, they really, 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 really got to emphasize what's it like, what's going on, what's going to happen after. Really, like, show me. And yeah, I don't know. It's a lot to take in sometimes.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
No, thank you for what?
Thank you for bringing that up, because it's a fantastic point. Something that I feel a lot as well. And that is actually like one thing, to go back to the idea of like stories where the TF doesn't feature enough in the story, but you wish it were.
Yeah.
A lot of times that's where like I start asking, like, okay, they don't need to make the transformation more of a plot thing, but like, how does the character feel? Like, there's a lot of cartoons where TF is like a throwaway gag or something, a character stuck as one thing for a little while, but they don't talk about the impact it has on the character that experienced the transformation. It's just, oh, oops, you turned into a monkey. All right, we're just gonna have to deal with that. And
well, sometimes that's the point too. Sometimes the point is the absurdity of it.
Oh yeah, sometimes.
That's what I'm talking about. There isn't always a need for it either. It's just the pull, the want is uniquely strong. Like, have you ever realized that? It like, even the way that you like to indulge in it has a lot to do with crafting the experience and like expressing it to people. And are you the kind of person who wants to be changed or to watch other people changed? I think it's both, right?
It is both, yeah.
In equal measure, or does one lean more into the other?
In general, it all kind of is equal, but if we were talking about specific TFs, there are some TFs that I would love to experience myself.
That's fine.
But there are sometimes there are TFs where I'm like, I'd rather just see someone else do this. I'm happy for them. It's awesome to watch, but like, I'd rather be something else.
But we're not. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about ideals, okay? Because like, when it comes to what we want, it's always going to be in the ideal way, right? So like, I'm asking again. It's like, are you leaning toward one way or the other?
Do you mean like an ideal world or an ideal story?
Like you? Do you want change more than to be changed? Like, do you want to be the subject, or do you want to look more? Which one do you lean more on?
I would lean more on the side of I want to be the one changed. And experience what that's like truly get into that, because the one thing I can't do right now is get into the head of that person that's gone through that transformation. And whether it's a real life person that is changing in front of my eyes, or somebody that's I'm reading about in a comic or watching on a show, I can't get into that head and that headspace. And that's why I want to be the one.
But you want it. You really want it. Okay, yeah. For your own reasons. Okay, so I think that desire is also like a really unique thing. I don't find that a lot of people really end up wanting something like that quite as much, or at least they do, but I guess it's not really at the forefront, because I think when it comes to escapism or just having a good time, it's laid out for you in such a way where you're like, this is what it's like, and people don't really ask the question. I guess it's kind of elemental, but with this stuff, it's a lot of things that people kind of got to make up on their own, or they've thought about, but in sort of like vague ways, and then they end up kind of crafting their own ideal experience. And when they do that over time, it's like, I want to see that expressed. I want to find other things that reinforce this thing that I have thought about, that I'm stuck in my own head with. And it's an interesting pursuit. Sometimes it's kind of strange. But I'm realizing, I'm finally able to put into words a little better just how interesting it is that the pursuit of that is so laser focused on it. And I guess if they can see other people being able to do it, they kind of do it themselves. This is a lot of supposition and shit like that. But I can't help but think about it. When I've been asked enough times, what's the story behind this? I'm like, dude, I don't fucking know what to tell you. You remember when you said, like, something is like, a beginning, middle, and end, but I don't make things with needing a story most of the time. Or I give you a hint to something, now put the rest together. Please don't ask me to, like,
you like to create. You like to create something where the audience interpretation at the end of the day is whatever they want to infer, and that inferring also translates some of their own wants and desires onto the piece without you actually having to explicitly say it, because you've left it open.
Yes, and it's weird that also people kind of like overlook that. It's one of the fun things. It's why I make it. I like being able to impress my own ideas on something when I'm not trying to tell a story or imply something. I'm just trying to capture a moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
And you can build things around that, which is what I do. So when people ask me if there's a story, like, well, I could make one, but who's really going to give a shit? And also, that's not the point of this.
And
I could
right. And if you were to actually do what they're asking and make a story, what are the chances that they're going to be satisfied with that particular story? Oh, that's not how I would have done it. It's like, well, then why'd you ask me to make it? You could have just
exactly
imagined your own interpretation. Like all artwork, once the art is finished and is observed by other people besides the artist, it takes on a new life. And for transformation art specifically, those evocative stories, feelings, sensations, those are what we think about a lot when we see even single images. There are some single images that are just there are particular details about it, or you can still tell a story in a single frame. And not that every single single image has to be a story, but like you can still look at a story and look at you can still look at a single image and infer from context clues like what may have happened just before, what might be about to happen, and everyone can have their own satisfying interpretation of it. And just I look at some art sometimes, some TF art, and it's just a mid-TF or post-TF single image, and I can imagine about, oh wow, what's it like to have those scales, to just like, they look so pebbly and glistening, and what does it feel like to run my hand on them? And I'm just thinking about like little moments like that, little tiny microseconds, and that in and of itself is like, can be its own little satisfying experience with the art that the artist has chosen to make.
Yeah, that's part of the point of some of the things that get made. And I know that Zill, for instance, really likes to add context, at least a little bit of context, to all the stuff that he makes. I've seen it. It's like, oh, what happens if you do this? Oh, I picked up a strange this. I woke up one day like this, or like, whoops, some sort of embarrassing scenario here. And that's because that's what he likes to do. But, that being said, I would still find it really weird for somebody to be like, oh, what about more of it? Like, this is what it is. And and that's one of the reasons that I'm pleased to know that Zill came away with a glowing review of your story and how it was worth the payoff and everything. And it's also fun because you got one guy who didn't read it and one guy who did.
Yeah, it's awesome to get those kind of like perspectives of that.
Just to close the point, I want to let people know again that you do have to recognize what's in front of you and just kind of work with it. If you're given something, pay attention to it, instead of lamenting or just strongly wanting what isn't there, because you'll be happier that way, I think.
Yeah. No, I honestly agree. I know we're coming up on the 2-hour mark, but I did have one last question I wanted to ask before we get to audience cues. And I guess I was curious, Cobalt, what ideas are you excited to explore in the future when it comes to plotting out transformations, and if that's even something you can elaborate on?
There are a few, and because it's not UTC, I'm not worried about spoiling details. So there's a comic that I hope to start very soon, as of the time of this recording, that involves a costume shift. One thing that I really enjoy, and I've got a few sequences up of costume TF. So there's I'm doing like I've tried to start a anthology series called Flux Visage, which each individual issue is going to have a standalone story or multiple small standalone stories of transformation-focused plots. And the next one is going to feature a diver, a professional swimmer who gets a special mermaid's style scuba diving outfit, and the outfit will transform around them and transform them into a full-on mermaid who can breathe underwater and everything like that. But it still retains elements of the actual suit. So it's not like, oh, the suit changed me and now it's either dissolved or it's or I've shed it or something. I still look like I'm in a kind of a suit, but it's not a suit, it's a living thing. Black Shirt Boy actually did one similar to the one that I'd been plotting. It's like, awesome, you beat me to it. If anyone's gonna do it, I'm so glad it was you, because that story was so good. That it was I think it was a longer title, but the short title is Mermaid Swimsuit, and it's very similar, but but there's different aspects to it. But the cool idea of watching that pattern remain, if that makes sense. The idea of this this inorganic thing that you were wearing changes you into an organic creature of a different type, but you retain like artifacts of what you had been wearing. So there's that little odd thing. So there's stuff like that like just a little interesting aesthetics is something that I've like gravitated more and more towards over the years. Not just human to animal or other physical specific transformations. It's more just like, oh, this costume is a part of me now.
I kind of like that similar aesthetic, and that's kind of what I like about the K-suits that I tried to make.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's like the K-suits you've done, Libra.
You've posted a few of those, right? Because that sounds familiar. I think I've seen some of those.
It's got its own little folder on FA.
So yeah, there's that's like one of the next things I'm going to be doing. And then in the future, like more abstractly, things that are kind of on my wish list are transformation as not necessarily transformation as mundane. Like I just got hired as a delivery, a messenger, and as part of that job, they're going to mutate me into a bird person or a bat or something with wings that I will be able to easily go and quickly do something. Or I'm a rescuer on Mount Everest, so I will transform into a mountain goat in order to go and do my job. Things like that, where it's just you punch in, you transform, you do your thing really well thanks to the transformation, and then you change back and you punch out.
Man, I feel like I've discussed that sort of plot before. God, it was a long time ago, though. Shit. Still though,
there's a lot you can dig into with that. It's juicy.
Yeah.
It's another thing like UTC where there are limitless possibilities you can do with stories like this. The thing is just I just haven't landed on exactly what that would be.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
Alrighty.
Cool. Well, I did want to leave time for our audience questions, of which we actually have a few. So thank you everyone who's sent them through. The first question I'll read out is from Postal Roo, patron of the podcast, and Postal Roo asks, what is the most challenging TF piece you've created in your opinion as an artist or a writer?
Time to
I can go first
through things. Go ahead.
Sure. So there is a dragon TF that I did back in I think 2019, which I don't know if we can actually show because there is dick involved. But that took me over a year to make. And by the time I was done with it, I was like, I am glad I did this because I have learned a lot of interesting things that will help me in the future with other pieces I want to make. I'm never doing this again. So yeah, I mean, challenging from a time perspective, a technical perspective, a passion perspective, just for one single image. But I learned a lot from it, and I think any good challenging thing that someone might create, I hope there's like lessons you take away from it too. So that would be my answer.
Yeah.
Short and sweet.
Every single piece of art you make is going to teach you something, whether it came out exactly the way you wanted it to, or whether it was totally different. Every single piece of art is a journey forward, a step forward, and discover a chance to discover something new about yourself.
Okay, I have my answer.
Go for it.
And this definitely cannot be shown, like, pretty much at all. But it's something that I titled FMBIF, and it stands for Fuck Me Before I Finish, which is how it starts. It is a sequence. It is, how many steps? It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is a six-step sequence. It started with a single pose that I really liked and thought, what if more, what if more? It turned into 6 separate steps. I had to juggle between, like, do I want to add more before or after, or focus on this or that? And it also took me, like, over a year. between, coming back to it repeatedly, each one being like painstakingly revised, asking people if it does this or that or whatever. I'd love to do it again, but faster.
That's always the challenge, isn't it?
Faster. I think I can do it faster these days, but boy, I wanted it to be just right. And I'm happy with it now, which is great. But oh my god, I very quickly looked through all the stuff I did, and I'm like, nope, that was faster. Nope, that was easier. Nope, I didn't have these problems. So I think it's that one, FMBIF. I'm glad a lot of people liked it, at least.
Excellent.
Yeah, it makes it at least something. It's like, okay, it's out there and it's getting a reception, and that's, that makes it at least a little bit worth the struggle of it doing it.
It was a very, I'm done. I don't care. I don't care if it doesn't get a single fave. I'm done. I'm finished. I feel better that it's finished. I had to finish it. I couldn't leave it alone. There you go. Cobalt,
honestly,
now you.
Well, honestly, good for you to like have the wherewithal to, allow yourself to just stop working on it and say, all right, this is it. But also still publicize it. Like that's, you could just have easily have buried it and not shared it with anyone, and that would have been a loss for the world. As however you may feel about your experience with it. Like same like what I was just talking about with class warfare. It's like, all right, let's just get this through, and it still worked out. So awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Probably like just technically challenging. There's a few pieces. The one that really like, the one I think is like, it's hard to think of most challenging. I'm just gonna pick a challenging one, and this one turned out like I really really am proud with how it turned out. I was commissioned to do a like 7 or 8 stage hair growth TF that was paired with clothing, fashion modeling, where basically the gist of it is a woman is she experiences this massive hair growth experience where it's drawn out and out and out, and she goes through various styles of wardrobe, but as her hair grows longer and longer, it starts to replace certain parts of what she would otherwise be wearing on those parts of her body, to the point where it's starting to become integrated, like braided in, or maybe she's wearing some of her hair as like a shawl or a sash, but then eventually it gets to the point where she's just in lingerie and the rest of the hair is just out and like doing its own thing. The final piece, which I can't tell you how long I spent on it. I did not measure it. I just kept going and going, and like, oh, I'm loving this. This is so like, it wasn't necessarily like the most challenging piece I ever made, I guess, but like the amount of time and effort I put into making the hair shine just right, making sure that all the little folds and loops and braids and everything, she, like, her, imagine Bayonetta, but instead of the hair actually turning into, like, a tight-fitting leather ensemble, the hair just grows more hair and looks like this massive fur coat with tassels, and it's, like, wrapping around her legs, it wraps around her feet in these super thick, massive boots, but it's all just her hair, and it's all still connected to her head, which was a fun... Yeah, like the real technical part was just figuring out, how do I get the hair, how do I draw each strand down from the top of her head and get it to her feet? Like, what journey does that strand of hair take down her body? And how does, like, not just being like, oh, it's a coat of hair that she's wearing. No, she's still wearing the hair that's growing from her head. So thinking of those little loops and different things, it was extremely fun to do, despite the challenge, and that's part of like what like it ultimately comes down to with the kind of thing that I really will get into. It's like, all right, I don't care how hard this is, I want to see this done. This idea is so good. And happily, my generous commissioner, who they loved it, and I posted it, and it got a lot of good praise as well. So it worked out all the way around. It was a win-win.
Cool. Hell yeah! No, that's awesome.
There's certainly been a lot of pieces where I'm just like, okay, this is too difficult, and and normally I would just lose the flair for it, and I would just walk away from it. And so I'm sure there have been a lot more challenging things, but I can't remember them because I moved on.
Yeah, no, that's entirely fair. We got a question from Mega ED Productions, which was very much inspired by our Animorphs episode. And so Mega Ed asks, say you get the ability to morph, choose any 3 animals, and rank how well you think you would resist their animalistic instincts.
3. I think I'd pick a...
Are we to interpret this as the implication is that we're resisting the animal instincts? So does this mean we're turning into animals that we wouldn't want the instincts for?
We can interpret it that way. It's up to interpretation, yeah.
It's like I said, 3 that you want to turn into, and all right, so I'll frame it to you this way. You get 3 that you want to turn into, and seeing as how you want to be those things, you probably have to resist the urges that would come with them. I mean, you already want to be the thing, but you don't want to be drowned out by it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've got a few ready if it's okay for me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
So first is certainly goat. I would definitely enjoy some of the instincts, probably some that allow me to relax a bit more and just enjoy bouncing around and climbing on shit and getting over my fear of heights. But also the instincts I would fight off would be those, the prey species instincts of constantly like being on my guard for things, and also just being so docile that I forget where I am and just enjoy munching on grass for a while. Like, part of me enjoys that thought of like, oh, what would it just be like to just become an animal and zone out? That's got to be so fun to just do that. But like, I also want to come back at some point, and I need to make sure that I remember to do that. So the ruminant instincts probably I'd be fighting a lot, despite how much I might enjoy being a goat. But also being a predator species is also fascinating in terms of like, and I'm not sure I would choose to do this, but I would be really interested if I were to be forcibly TF'd into, like, say, like a saber-toothed tiger or a cheetah or any of the big cats, where I'd be like, I'd feel like awesome and cool. Snow leopard, sorry. Snow leopard would absolutely be the one. They're fluffy and soft and amazing, and but still, like, they're a predatory animal, and so like I would want to. What I want to necessarily tear into every single thing, like flex my claws, like the danger of what I'd represent, I'd probably be fighting, or I would want to be fighting off, like going feral. It's an appealing thought. I wouldn't ask for it, but it's still just that is an appealing thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh wait, sorry, you had a third one, I think.
I'm still fishing for the third one, so if you'd like to go ahead.
Okay, no
ready.
worries. Yeah, I think I've got my 3, so it's funny because you mentioned 2 of my 3, but that's okay. So 2 of the ones I would pick, because no, you're good. I would have cheetah and snow leopard on my list because I'm just a massive cat at the end of the day. I think I would probably be better at resisting the cheetah one over the snow leopard one, and I think that's partially maybe like a bias on my end in terms of how I perceive them, but cheetahs are like, they run very fast, but it's more short distances and stuff. I think snow leopards have a bit better long-term endurance, and also I've always interpreted them as being a bit more goofy, so I think on their front, I think I'd be a little bit more inclined to go with, whatever it is that Snapbrain is telling me to do. But to like pick something in like the complete opposite direction, I think the third one that I would pick would probably be like a husky or some kind of a dog breed, just because I do find the concept of dog brain to be fascinating. And I think that one I probably would be the best at resisting, because I'm not inclined to like be like kind of no thoughts, head empty sometimes. And I guess maybe that's also why I picked husky, because I know they're like really hyper and vocal, which is me. So I guess I've kind of like hemmed myself in by picking animals I think I would be suited well towards anyways. But that's up to the audience's interpretation, I guess.
That's all good.
All right, I'm not really like super committed to any of these. So I thought about a lot of things. So first, let me just say that I think of my situation as wanting to live in a city or living in a city, living around people. So first choice would be some kind of dog, so like a Rottweiler or something. In terms of being able to resist the urges, I mean, I'd want to be like pampered and pet and stuff like that. So that would be kind of hard to resist because I actually really like touch. And a cat also gets like the same benefits, but I was also thinking in terms of being able to get around. Cats can just slink around a bunch of places and get to places that they shouldn't be, and also they can survive a lot of shit. Let me see. They're both socially acceptable around here. In case something were to happen, nobody would really think too weird if you're just like walking around as one. But the last thing, in terms of getting around, but I guess being remarkable enough to be recognized, I think I'd want to be like a raven or a crow or something. Something that's really smart. Probably would have to resist the urges to look at anything that was like pretty, shiny, bright, things like that, because I like those things. And I think I could resist that okay, because they're really smart birds. They're also pretty big, and like, I don't know, I think I'd like to be able to know that I wouldn't have to fight too much to be a problem solver. So those are the three choices I made out with.
Solid choices.
Got a third choice, Cobalt?
I unfortunately, my head just keeps coming back to cats. I just want to be a cat.
That is
fine. Whatever,
I
man.
support this. I support
for all the
this.
reasons
Whatever, man.
you've both listed as well. It's just like just the feeling of being scratched behind the ears or the tummy scratches, and just the idea of just having this wonderful warm fur coat and just being able to cuddle up in a ball wherever, and just those are so talking about those instincts. I wouldn't resist them. Like, I don't know how I could.
No, I completely agree and endorse this. So, okay. And then the third question we have is from Max Velocity, who asks, "Do you think regeneration in Doctor Who, so TF upon dying, is that a price you'd be willing to pay to transform?" I'm gonna say no from my end, because then I don't like. There's identity death involved there, which, like, don't get me wrong, I'm obviously have an interest in that, but the way that one's worded, it sounds like there is definitely a split in the consciousness, and so I'm not gonna really like remember it. So I'm good. I don't think I'd go for that. I don't know. What do y'all think?
No, I wouldn't. I don't want to. It's like the Star Trek teleporter thing, There is the very strong suspicion, because you can say whatever you want about the show, but the idea is that you're never really going somewhere. You are sending your copy. You're always sending your copy. The last you has been gone every single time you get transported, which is why that even comes up in the show, because people wonder, are you really sending the person? So I wouldn't want to die just to have a copy of me, maybe kind of enjoy it or be like, I don't know. It's plus, it wouldn't be me if I'm going to be dead. Why the fuck would I do it?
Yeah. And to get out in front of any Trekkies that might post in the comments, because I know I would certainly have the inkling to be like, well, actually, this is the way transporters work. I still completely agree with you, Libra. Like, some interpretation of the transporter is it breaks you down and just emails a copy, and then they use local matter that's around the receiving transporter pad to reconstitute your body exactly the way it was. But no, it's not the same. Another description of the transporter is that there's actually an energy transfer stream, like some kind of intangible but physical connection, where the transporter breaks your matter down into energy and transmits that same exact energy across space, and then reassembles you at the receiving end. So it's like, oh, it's the same matter, it just transformed in energy, came back into matter again. Okay, but like, if you took an ice cube and you unthawed it, and then you just poured it into a different glass and you froze it again, is it the same ice cube? Like, I don't know. Maybe that's not a great example, but still the idea of you have fundamentally changed every single particle that makes me me. It doesn't matter if, like, I may be a one-to-one copy physically. Like, it's still a copy.
Yeah, like, where are you in this equation? Nobody can answer that.
Yeah, exactly.
And even in Star Trek, nobody knows what the fuck consciousness is. They don't have a thing.
Yeah.
Consciousness? Who is she? I don't know her, you know?
It is heartening that even Star Trek, which tries to come up with an explanation for a whole lot of things that you don't really need to explain, will just accept it as long as it's consistent.
Yeah.
They still don't try to explain what a soul is, and they admit that they don't know. It's very nice that they just don't try to solve everything. That there's always an answer. As long as we explore space long enough, we'll be able to find an answer to everything. Well, no, you can still be optimistic and say we're gonna go out there, we're gonna learn more about ourselves and about the universe we live in. And that can absolutely be true again and again and again, but you're never going to answer every question, and they don't try, and that's nice. To answer the
Healthy
question,
mystery.
to answer the question though, I agree with you guys. No, I would not want to regenerate. It means waiting to die in order to get the thing I want, and that just doesn't feel good in any way.
Yeah, not a fan.
Okay, there is one interpretation where that would work, but it would be working by Dragon Ball Z's stupid logic.
Oh my god!
Anybody knows anything about Perfect Cell?
Yeah.
No. Oh well.
Yeah,
if you know,
like but Perfect Cell absorbs the androids and becomes different, and then when he spits them out, he's back to the original.
No. Remember what happened when he blew himself up, and there was one cell that survived, and it replicated back? Yes, that bullshit.
Yes.
Assuming that one cell is enough to maintain who you are, what you want to be, because he died in a different form and came back as his perfect self simply because his body remembered it. Fuck you. Fuck
you. Do
you. And no, but that was also a horrifying death anyway, so I wouldn't do it.
It also robbed Gohan of a fantastic peak of his character arc. It's like you just had this amazing scene, and whoops, it was for nothing because am I getting them in the wrong order?
We're not going to talk about Dragon Ball. We're not going to do this now.
Okay.
I'm just going to speed things along because I know nothing about Dragon Ball, so we're just going to keep going. Yes. So the last question we have is from Figerfire. And so Figerfire says, TF potions have become mainstream. There's various forms and durations available on the market, but since we've yet to escape capitalism, every single one is branded. So create a brand, like a name for one, and how you feel they would style their TF product line. I can go first because I was thinking about this one. And I think there would definitely, knowing furries, someone would eventually come up with a TF potion that was focused on paws. I think that would be inevitable. I think there would probably be like a positive change one, which is like a terrible grown-worthy pun, which is the best kind. And I feel like they would very much be playing up the pause element of the branding. And so that would just be like, one of their like kind of underlying things. And maybe their different flavors would be for some of the different species you could get. And of course, they would be specializing in species with interesting feats. So say frogs or kangaroos or elephants or things like that. So that would be my my brand or whatever.
Okay. Let's see. I don't want to add the letter K to everything because
I mean you can. It's your brand.
I could, but it meshes too much with other things. There's even something called the K line, and that would have been fun for me. But that's a real company that you can find. So I'd probably stick to something like the Libra brand, or at least The idea of balancing your living experience, why just be that? You can have many things, try a little bit of everything. And it would be made and I think it would be like a made-to-order sort of thing. You know, you have, I think one would give their, like, genetic profile or something, and then they could be manipulated in certain ways, and then, you know, you could call for your custom and get it. It's just like a K-suit, but you don't have to wear it.
Yeah.
And the
Nice.
time limit would be very strict, because they'll wear off when they wear off.
Animorphs rules. I get it.
Animorphs rules?
The strict time limit, at least.
No, the strict time limit would be if you don't, consequences. By strict time limit, I mean you'll be forced to revert. So be mindful.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, you're in your own head. I understand.
How about you, Cobalt?
So this answer is going to be something that's actually already in a piece of art. I commissioned Halcyon to do a doll transformation comic where my TG Sona Rowena goes and has a full body bath in a body wash called Ideal Essence. And
very nice.
like, so this line elevator pitch is a series of different potions that actually act as salves or shampoos or body washes, things that you can just, for as part of your integrating your self-care routine, and you will come away from it sooner or later with a changed body. So that could be a whole bunch of applications. In the Doll TF comic, she turns from a normal human into a living, moving plastic ball jointed doll. Because it has it's for renewing her skin, and who has more perfect skin than a completely smooth doll?
Chef's kiss.
But you can easily ascribe that to mermaids, and you could also do like hair potions, shampoos that will grow longer hair, thicker hair, permanently spiked hair, permanently braided hair, whatever you want, and things like that can just change your outward complexion.
Nice.
Alrighty.
I like that. Well, that is all the questions that I had. I don't know if you had any questions for us, Cobalt.
Do we have time for questions? I can throw a couple at you guys.
Yeah.
For Libra, we were talking a little bit earlier about just talking about specific like single images of TF and how those are fully formed concepts all in of themselves. Are you inclined more to drawing mid-form TFs or post-TFs?
Mid-form. If I want to draw the animal, that's fine, but you can find beautiful art of all kinds of animals all the time. What comes in between is what's always been the most fascinating thing to me, the transition part. The fly is nothing without the transition. Lots of movies. People love American Werewolf in London, but nobody fucking does the werewolf at the end just straight away. They don't want to be like, oh, whoops, that's it. And coming from that spot specifically, there are plenty of people who will just make a werewolf, but that's what I like to do. I like to do the mid stuff. The post stuff could be fine, but it's also not as interesting a thought experiment. I guess the only time that it's recently been sort of different is when I've been exploring the Pokemon stuff, because I find that in order for me to do a transformation of it, I want to realize it in a way that makes sense to me, which means that I lately have been sketching out what the Pokemon would look like to me more in my style. And I did it with Vaporeon recently because I want to do something with Vaporeon, but I was thinking, man, what the fuck would I do with that thing that would be interesting to me and make sense? And in that respect, I would have to draw the end result, and I'm kind of happy exploring that. But most of the time, it's the mid part, because the mid part is something that is one of the coolest things to me. It shows what you have to endure in order to become the thing.
Just a last question. If Ratchet and Clank teamed up with Knuckles in a video game, who would end up being the leader?
Oh, that's a spicy question. I mean, from my perspective, I think actually the leader would end up being Clank. The reason why I say that is because I think Clank is very much the thinking up plans person. I think Ratchet is more of an improviser, and at least from my perspective, I think Knuckles kind of is more aligned to that. Now, I don't know if Knuckles would accept that. That's a completely different story, but at least I think if I had to pick, I would say Clank would be the leader. As much as that hurts my fuzzy Lombax ass to say, I would admit I
thought the question was between Ratchet and Knuckles, not Ratchet, Clank, and Knuckles.
Oh, sorry.
It's who would end up. It's open ended. So if you feel like Clank would work out as a leader, then that's totally fair.
Okay, then yeah, I think it would. If I had to pick between Ratchet and Knuckles, I don't know. I guess if you pushed me, maybe Knuckles. I don't know. It's a hard question though.
I'll give you my feedback. If Ratchet is too old for whatever the fuck, I think he's more likely to follow, but wouldn't just go along with just every little thing that you say. Of course, Clank definitely somebody who thinks about stuff. Knuckles is perfectly fine with listening and taking orders here and there. He does have the rebel streak, but he has grown a lot in the games. His hot-headedness is not like an overwhelming thing. He's not as dumb as he's made out to be. And Knuckles has also been the leader of the Resistance against Robotnik in Forces, and then also that gets carried over into IDW comics. And then in Frontiers, he's also kind of painted as somebody who knows military strategy and stuff like that, and knows what to do. So he can lead if he wants to, but he's totally fine being like a member of the team. He's very flexible. Clank being the leader is totally possible, and he'd probably give some sort of snarky or whatever response of being like, I never thought I'd take orders from some sort of robot, but it's the first time for everything, I guess.
Yeah, that's a cool dynamic to do, because he's usually fighting them.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's fair to think that Clank would be the leader, and also fair to think that in certain circumstances Knuckles would. For Knuckles, it would seem like the only time he wouldn't have... It seems like the only time he'd have a problem going along with any team is if he doesn't feel like he's being utilized to the best effect. Whether that means he's the leader or whether he's just like, just point me at a target and send me out, and you guys do whatever you need to do. But, don't sideline me.
Yeah.
Because I'm not staying put. People are in danger. My island's in danger. This needs to get solved.
Yeah, that would drive him nuts. I like that characterization. It's a good one for him.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
And I think to just further underline the point about I don't think Ratchet would be the leader, he's actually been in the dynamic of being on teams before, and almost every single time he's not been the leader, and he's actually totally fine with that. And it's more because usually the leadership is kind of incompetent anyways, and so he will do his own thing, but he's also I don't think he especially his more recent characterization, he does not grasp for the limelight in any way, and so he's more than happy to let someone else be the blowhard figurehead, and he'll actually go off and do the good work that needs to be done, kind of thing.
Isn't Rift Apart then, from what I've learned last time, the first time that he really is kind of in charge of his own shit?
Kind of,
because he's alone for good stretches until he finds Kit, and that's a long time into the game.
Yeah, no, it is actually the first time, in my opinion, where he actually is kind of the quasi leader, and that's how many games into the franchise? I mean, again, he likes to aspire to be the leader in some of the PS2 games, but he's never really even the leader there either. So
yeah, and then he's the one with the most experience dealing with Nefarious and winning. While Rivet is the one who's merely just been surviving and never actually beat him before, and therefore he kind of gets the leader role by seniority and experience.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. But yeah, don't sideline Knuckles. He punched the god out of Sonic, and he'll do it. And he'll do it to anybody else who needs it.
He'll do it again. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Cobalt, for coming on. I wanted to make sure you had an opportunity, though. If people are looking for you online, where can they find you?
Thanks so much, Zill and Libra, for having me. This has been an absolute blast to hash it out with you guys. So people can find me on various socials. Cobalt Kimera, that's spelled CobaltKimera. I'm on bluesky.social, same name on mastodon.social and on Pillowfort. I go by Cobalt_K for Affinity and also on Transfer. So you can find my art on any of those wonderful places. For the UTC comic specifically, you can read all of it at utc-comic.com. And since the third phase is now finished, the third and latest trade paperback collection, at the time of this recording, will soon be available. Maybe it is available at the time you listen to this. You can go to utc-comic.com and click on Store in the menu to find out how to buy it, either physically or as a digital PDF.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, and please go out and check out UTC if you haven't already. It's really good. It's worth it. I promise you will not be disappointed.
Yeah, either check out UTC and get a copy, and if you don't feel like doing that, try Patreon for us. Support one of us. Or both of us.
Or both. That's
one
the
or
best
both.
option. I'd say both.
Yeah, do both. Both will grant you experiences that you can keep forever.
Exactly.
Support the local TF community in your area.
Exactly.
And especially support those who are creating fantastic forums in which to discuss transformation, and hopefully, fingers crossed, soon to be award-winning platforms. I hope I didn't just jinx you, crap.
Yeah. Hopefully. I mean, again, it's really exciting to be able to say that we're nominated for the Ursa Majors. Again, we'll have a link in the show description, or maybe even on screen, because it appears from where I'm looking right now that anyone can sign up with their email to get a key to go then and vote. So it would be awesome if you would check us off. I'll also just shout out, in terms of the nominees, there are some other transformation related things that have been nominated. So Nimona is nominated for Best Motion Picture, and in Animorphs is nominated for Best Graphic Story for Would Have Bit You, and Animorphs are friend of the pod. So those are all TF things that you can vote for. There's probably others that I'm not familiar with, but
when does
overall,
voting end again?
Voting is from March the 1st until, I believe, March the 24th. Actually.
Awesome. All right, so everybody has time.
A long period.
Yep. All right. Yeah. So yeah, vote. Please vote. And if you like us,
please vote.
Yeah, if you like us, just let them know.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much again, Cobalt, for coming on, and thank you everyone for listening. I know this has been quite the mammoth episode. We had a lot to cover, and it was a great discussion. So thank you so much for listening. I hope that you all have an amazing week, that you keep an open mind and stay TFy, and we'll see you back here again next week.
You picked mammoth, which is very, very hairy. Good work.
True.
And thank you again for having me on. This was a blast.
Keep your spark in the darkness, people. See you later.
See you later.
Dear God, give a bald guy a break. Amen. I have hair. I have hair!